Chapter 68. Suddenly, Luo Fan's expression changed slightly, as though he had sensed something. He raised his head and looked towards the east of Buzhou Mountain. However, in the blink of an eye, his expression returned to normal. He turned his head and focused his attention on Hong Jun. After Luo Fan's thought entered Hong Jun's mind, Hong Jun's expression gradually became peaceful. His body also produced a strong suction force, continuously absorbing the primordial energy emitted by the primordial energy source into his body. Luo Fan revealed a faint smile on his face. After all, the feeling of watching the teacher of a sage and the teacher of heaven and earth improve bit by bit under his guidance was really intoxicating, especially when the teacher of a sage and the teacher of heaven and earth was very obedient. That feeling was even more wonderful. Hong Jun circulated the energy in his body, which was already in the form of mana, according to the circulation route of the technique of supporting heaven and earth. His mind and thoughts were even chanting the mantra of the technique of supporting heaven and earth. In an instant, he had already entered the cultivation state of the technique of supporting heaven and earth. As he entered this state, the speed at which the primordial energy around him was absorbed became faster. More and more primordial energy was drawn into his body, and it was continuously scattered, crushed, and purified by his energy. In the end, it was completely integrated into the energy. The amount of energy kept increasing. Luo Fan checked carefully for a while and was completely at ease. There was nothing special about the next step. He only needed to cultivate for a long time, continuously absorb, and strengthen the energy in his body so that it could reach the level required to cultivate the Jade Archive technique of creation. There were no problems or obstacles in between, but there was no need for him to watch from the side. However, this step was, after all, a very important and crucial step for Hong Jun. Hence, Luo Fan did not dare to neglect it. He gently raised his hand and waved. The purplish-yellow light in the surroundings suddenly condensed and turning into the Wuji Palace in the void again. "Where's Wuji, child?" Luo Fan shouted softly. His voice was rather dignified. "The limitless boy is here and will listen to master's orders." An emotionless voice resounded. Then, a fair-skinned boy rushed out of the limitless palace. He suddenly sank down and landed in front of Luo Fan, bowing as if he was showing some respect. "Seal the surrounding area of 100 miles. Don't let any external force disturb Hong Jun's cultivation," Luo Fan ordered faintly. "Understood." The limitless boy bowed. His respectful posture and emotionless voice formed a sharp contrast, causing the scene to seem rather strange. After he finished speaking, his body trembled and he drilled into the everlasting void palace. Then, the limitless void palace suddenly exploded, turning into a rolling purplish-yellow cloud. It suddenly collapsed and instantly covered a radius of 100 miles around the chaotic Yuanqi source. When this purplish-yellow cloud was condensed, it looked quite obvious and thick. However, when it was dispersed within a radius of 100 kilometers, it seemed extremely faint, almost to the point where it was almost undetectable. It only made the environment within a radius of 100 kilometers look a little different from the environment in other places. Luo Fan felt the space within a radius of 100 miles and found that the space within a radius of 100 miles seemed to be completely isolated. It existed in the primordial world. A feeling of self-sufficiency came into his mind. This was the sign of this world being sealed. It was the feeling that this world could only have when it was isolated from the primordial world. After sensing it, Luo Fan was very satisfied. He shook his body and turned into a long rainbow, flying to a place more than 10,000 miles away in the east. That was the place where he had sensed the abnormality before. When he came to a place more than 10,000 miles away from the Hong Jun group, the long rainbow that Luo Fan had transformed into sank and landed on a huge stone. This big stone looked quite ordinary. The material and shape were all the same. The only commendable thing was probably its size. It was extremely huge, with a diameter of 10,000 feet. Under its reflection, Luo Fan's figure was even smaller than an ant. It was rare for an ordinary stone to reach such a size, even in the primordial world. Most of this big stone was underground, but the small part that was exposed was already like a hill. Its surface was not very smooth, and there were not many strange bumps. It was grayish-brown, and there was a faint aura of chaos on it. This was very common in the primordial world when the world had just been created and yin and yang had just been separated. It should be here. Luo Fan stood on the top of the stone and thought to himself. He didn't choose this place at random, and he didn't come here to play. Instead, when he brought Hung Jun to the source of chaotic vitality, he suddenly sensed that there seemed to be a very weak and obscure spiritual sense reaction below this place. This spiritual sense was not only obscure and weak, but also very slow. Because of this, the limitless boy, who was always sensing the abnormality around, did not sense the existence of this spiritual sense. Luo Fan had the earthly immortal's Tao fruit. Although his sensing range was not as good as the limitless boy's, his sensitivity and meticulousness were not comparable to the limitless boy's. Therefore, Luo Fan could discover the existence of this spiritual sense, but the limitless boy could not. Luo Fan stood on top of the stone, and a mnemonic chant flowed through his mind. 2 golden lights shot out from his eyes and shrouded the somewhat exaggeratedly huge stone. It's really here. Luo Fan's X-ray vision was very mysterious. In the blink of an eye, he had seen through the whole big stone and the location of the spiritual sense. It was a fist-sized ball of light. It was crystal clear and bright like water. It contracted and contracted, looking like a beating heart. Waves of faint life, chi, seeped out from it, completely isolating this ball of light from ordinary objects. No one would mistake it for a dead object. Such a strange spiritual sense. It's really wonderful. Luo Fan looked at this spiritual sense and exclaimed in his heart. Among the spiritual senses he encountered, even the strange trees that did not have a complete spiritual sense had a physical body. This spiritual sense was particularly strange. It only had the shape of a ball of light. It was tangible but not tangible. It did not look like an innate god. Instead, it looked like the cloud-shaped creatures in the astral wind, lightning, and fire layer. Let's communicate with it. After Luo Fan scanned it a few times, his mind moved slightly. As he thought about it, a mantra flowed through his mind. It was the mantra of his mind connection technique. When this magical power was used, Luo Fan felt that his mind seemed to be connected with a very obscure, very slow, and very vague mind. Luo Fan had experienced this kind of connection several times. Naturally, he would not lose his mind. He transmitted his goodwill to that mind through this thought. After waiting for a long time, almost when Luo Fan thought that this spiritual sense was very incomplete and did not even know how to respond to the situation in the outside world, the spiritual sense finally responded. So happy, so full. The thought transmitted by the spiritual sense was like a baby learning to speak, word by word, intermittently. Do you have a name? Luo Fan transmitted this thought. Name? What is that thing? Similarly, after a long time, the strand of spiritual sense finally conveyed this thought. Since your spiritual sense was born, the first word that appeared in your mind was your name. Mountain God Buzhou. The thought transmitted by the spiritual sense was still intermittent at first, but the last 4 words were connected, forming an effect like a thunderbolt in Luo Fan's mind. Buzhou Mountain God. Luo Fan had made countless guesses, but he had never thought that this spiritual sense would have such an identity. Chapter 69. Buzhou Mountain was the backbone of Pangu and the primordial sky pillar. It was out of Luo Fan's expectation that there would be a mountain god in such a miraculous mountain. However, the title of mountain god sounded good, but in fact, it was just a restraint. Even though he was in charge of Buzhou Mountain, the miraculous mountain in the world, his nature could not be changed. In just a moment, Luo Fan, who was addicted to taking disciples, gave up the idea of taking him as a disciple. He decided to maintain a good relationship with the god of Buzhou Mountain, but he would never take him as a disciple. What was the use of taking a disciple who was bound and restrained? Such a big change happened in his mind in less than a blink of an eye. In the blink of an eye, Luo Fan had decided his way of dealing with the god of Buzhou Mountain. I don't think you have any cultivation method. I have a method that can help you transform. I'm willing to exchange the right to control the top of Buzhou Mountain with you. Are you willing? Luo Fan transmitted his thought into the mind of the god of Buzhou Mountain through his mind connection stone. He believed that as the god of Buzhou Mountain, he must have some kind of control over Buzhou Mountain. The only difference was the degree of control. Shape-shifting. I want to shape-shift. I can do this. After understanding his own origin, mountain god Buzhou's consciousness became much more agile. His thoughts were no longer conveyed word by word like before, and his reactions were not as slow as before. So simple and adorable. This was the first thought that came to Luo Fan's mind, but this was naturally the best for him. Moreover, he would not let the god of Buzhou Mountain suffer losses. With a thought, countless complicated and abstruse characters and patterns intertwined and rotated, gradually combining into a magic formula that contained endless mysteries. It condensed into a spiritual light and suddenly rushed into the god of Buzhou Mountain's spiritual consciousness. It exploded, turned into memories, and completely integrated with the god of Buzhou Mountain. Great path of God. An indescribable joy came from the god of Buzhou Mountain's spiritual consciousness. Luo Fan, who was connected to it through his mind connection stone, felt an indescribable joy in his heart. For you, after the joy, the god of Buzhou Mountain sent out a thought. Along with this thought, there was a spot of light that was as clear as water. This spot of light slowly split from its body and separated. At this moment, an indescribable pain was transmitted to Luo Fan's soul through his mind connection stone. At the sight of it, Luo Fan knew that the god of Buzhou Mountain was cutting off a part of his body that represented the authority to control the peak of Buzhou Mountain. This was equivalent to cutting off one's limbs. It was definitely a very painful feeling. Similarly, it also meant that as long as the spot of light was absorbed into one's body, one would be able to gain the authority to control the peak of Buzhou Mountain. The god of Buzhou Mountain who had lost this spot of light would also lose the authority to control the peak of Buzhou Mountain. It seems that I've gained a great advantage. Luo Fan could not help but feel a headache coming on. Initially, he only wanted the god of Buzhou Mountain to bestow the authority to him. He did not want to seize the authority to control the peak of Buzhou Mountain. The reward he offered was only for the granting of the authority. The great way of enlightened God was a cultivation method that Luo Fan had created based on the abilities that a deity should have and the characteristics that an enlightened God should have in his memory. Its profoundness and complexity were needless to say. When it was cultivated to perfection, one would be able to achieve the supreme enlightened God position. By then, Buzhou Mountain would become one's absolute territory. In this territory, one would be almost omnipotent and obtain an immortal life. Moreover, one could absorb the belief that all living things in the world had for Buzhou Mountain to grow. In the end, one could obtain the strength that was similar to the peak of the earthly immortal realm. Such a cultivation method was naturally enough to exchange for the authority to control the peak of Buzhou Mountain. In fact, it might even be slightly more than that. However, if it was exchanged for seizing the authority to control the peak of Buzhou Mountain, it was far from enough. It was a great advantage for him. Sighing, Luo Fan took the light that was as clear as water. He did not put it into his body. Instead, he covered it with his left hand and put it into the world in the sleeve. With a slight movement of his mind, countless complicated and abstruse characters condensed and recombined in his mind. In the end, they turned into a mental cultivation method that was made up of over 300 characters. The mental cultivation method suddenly condensed and turned into a divine light. Through the connection of his mind connection, it was transmitted into the spiritual consciousness of the god of Buzhou Mountain. It suddenly exploded and turned into a memory that merged with the god of Buzhou Mountain. When a mental cultivation method of over 300 characters merged into his body, the body of the god of Buzhou Mountain, which was as clear as water, suddenly shook violently. An indescribable shock and gratitude flowed into Luo Fan's soul through the connection of his mind connection. Luo Fan sighed and said, "This method is only a possibility. Whether or not it will succeed, I'm afraid it will depend on your luck." When he was done talking, he did not care how grateful the god of Buzhou Mountain was. He retracted the mind connection, and with a shake of his body, he transformed into a long beam of light and darted toward the southeast. Before long, he landed in front of a cave over 100 miles away. Although the mental cultivation method he transmitted into the spiritual consciousness of the god of Buzhou Mountain was only about 300 characters, it was at least 10 times more precious than the great way of deity. It was because it was the art of deity transcendence, a mental cultivation method that could allow the god of Buzhou Mountain to have a chance of transcendence after cultivating it. Of course, it was just a chance. He still needed to spend a great deal of effort and great luck to be able to transcend the position of a mountain god. Luo Fan's knowledge and strength were not enough for him to create a cultivation method that could allow a god like the mountain god to escape. If he had such an ability, with his addiction to taking in disciples, he would not let go of such a good disciple like the god of Buzhou Mountain. After all, the god of Buzhou Mountain had the authority to control the entire Buzhou Mountain. If he took Luo Fan as his disciple, Luo Fan's authority would be equal to his. Why would he need to exchange a cultivation method for the authority to control the mountaintop? Although it was just a chance for the god of Buzhou Mountain, it meant that there was hope for him to reach the Great Way, and he had the chance to obtain the god of Z. That was why the god of Buzhou Mountain, who had just understood his origin, was so shocked and grateful. The cave that Luo Fan had fallen into had a primal chaos origin energy source. At this moment, the primal chaos origin energy was gurgling out of the cave. The primal chaos origin energy was like a gray mist that was constantly gushing out of the cave. Because of the special nature of Buzhou Mountain, the source of chaotic energy was distributed closer to Buzhou Mountain. When he reached the top of Buzhou Mountain, the source of chaotic energy could be seen almost everywhere. Luo Fan had seen a lot of it when he came to Buzhou Mountain to meet Hongjun. Naturally, he knew about it. Therefore, he was not picky. As long as he needed it, he would use it without being picky. After falling into the entrance of the cave, Luo Fan's mind moved. He already knew that the primal chaos yuan qi source was less than 1,000 feet deep in the cave. It was neither too big nor too small for him to cultivate for a long time, but it was enough for him to do what he wanted to do. Luo Fan took a step forward. With just one step, he crossed 1,000 feet and arrived at the source of chaotic energy. It was embedded in the depths of the cave. Most of it was wrapped in mountain rocks, and only a small part stuck to the wall like a protruding hill. Luo Fan measured it and found that the exposed size was just enough to be covered by his back. He raised his hand and made a grabbing motion. A small platform rose from the ground and extended to the protruding hill. He took a step forward and sat cross-legged on the platform. His back was stuck to the part of the cave wall where the source of chaotic energy came from. With a thought, his body produced a strong suction force. The source of chaotic energy dispersed by the source of chaotic energy was madly absorbed by him and poured into his body. He stretched out his hand gently, and a light as clear as water appeared in his hand. It was the existence that he had obtained from the god of Buzhou Mountain, which represented the authority to control the summit of Buzhou Mountain. Chapter 70. The light, which was as clear as water, was very mysterious and had the power to move anyone's heart. However, Luo Fan did not intend to take it into his body. Although it seemed appropriate and had endless benefits, it contained very obscure dangers and restrictions. Because if he did so, he could have absolute control over the top of Buzhou Mountain and could even change the topography, environment, and even the weather at the top of Buzhou Mountain at will. He was almost like the owner of Mount Buzhou, but at the same time, he also had a close and almost inseparable connection with the top of Mount Buzhou. This connection would in turn restrict him. Even if it could not restrict him as tightly as it could restrict the god of Buzhou Mountain and make him unable to leave Buzhou Mountain, it would definitely have some strong or weak restraints on his mind. And this, for Luo Fan, whose heart was concerned with the Great Tao, was almost fatal. With a thought, he waved his left hand and covered his sleeve. In the blink of an eye, dozens of materials came out of the sleeve and were restrained by an invisible force. They floated in the air and slowly floated around the light that was as clear as water. These materials were naturally collected by Luo Fan on his way to the Yellow Spring when Hong Jun was going through his first heavenly tribulation. There were many kinds of materials, but they were enough to refine several powerful celestial devices. Looking at these materials, Luo Fan's mind flashed. He was thinking carefully and deducing how to refine this celestial device. After a while, he had already thought of what kind of celestial device to refine, what materials to use, and what methods to use. Even the final form of the celestial device was floating in his mind. After making up his mind, Luo Fan raised his hand and waved. The earthly immortal Tao fruit suddenly sucked in the primordial qi that kept pouring into his body from his back and released it. It turned into a faint gray flame and spurted out from his palm. The primordial qi that poured into his back was endless, so naturally, the gray flame was endless as well. It kept spurting out and producing. This gray flame was not the heavenly fire, extraordinary fire, earth fire, wood fire, stone fire, or any other strange fire. It was the Taoist fire. It was a mysterious flame triggered by the fruit of Tao and ignited with the primordial qi as the fuel. This flame was very mysterious and profound. It was more profound than any other flame. It could be used to attack and burn mountains and boil seas. But that was not the greatest effect of the Taoist fire. The greatest effect of the Taoist fire was in refining weapons. After using it to refine a material, its grade would increase by one level. Above that, there would be a formless life force, and there would be more chances for it to produce spiritual sense. In other words, the materials refined with the Taoist fire would have more opportunities to become magic treasures. For a magic tool, this kind of opportunity was equivalent to giving an ordinary person a chance to become an immortal. It was a kind of power that could be recreated. In the primordial world, the refining of Dharma artifacts and Dharma treasures was not like in some novels. One had to use flames to refine and extract essence to refine. Because of this, Luo Fan had refined 4 or 5 magic treasures. But this was the first time that the Taoist fire, which was most suitable for refining weapons, had appeared. Because of this, Luo Fan had refined 4 or 5 magic treasures. But this was the first time that the Taoist fire, which was most suitable for refining weapons, had appeared. He raised his hand and patted the air. The Taoist fire instantly surged over and wrapped all the materials in the blink of an eye. Then, the materials melted and collapsed at a speed that was almost visible to the naked eye. Among them, countless impurities were converted and burned, turning into invisible smoke and dissipating. However, the heat emitted by the Taoist fire did not leak out at all. Instead, it was restrained to the extreme, and the heat was completely focused on the materials. Even Luo Fan, who was extremely close to the Taoist fire, did not feel the slightest bit of heat. What he felt was that the surrounding environment was still so cool, and it was no different from before. Earth essence, chaotic essence, iron, blood river origin, unrefined gold steel, topaz crystal. The 36 different materials that Luo Fan had taken out gradually merged into one. The light that was as clear as water was completely wrapped in it, and it could no longer be seen. The liquid ball was half the size of a person. It was chaotic, as if it was made up of countless materials, but it also seemed to be an extremely pure and condensed substance. It was very mysterious. The ball of liquid was condensed from the 36 materials. However, After being refined by the Tao fire, it had a faint, almost imperceptible life force compared to those materials. This made the liquid ball no longer look like an ordinary dead object. Instead, it had become an embryo that was pregnant with life. It was mysterious and wonderful. Suddenly, Luo Fan's mind moved. Complicated and mysterious talismans suddenly flowed through his mind. Then, through a mysterious mechanism, they were suddenly drawn out and thrown into the liquid ball. They quickly collapsed, quickly shuttled, and quickly reorganized. Gradually, they formed layers of complicated and mysterious restrictions. The talismans kept being thrown in, and the restrictions kept being formed. As the layers of restrictions took shape, countless profound lines flashed on the surface of the liquid sphere, forming a mysterious pattern. At the same time, its size was constantly shrinking, and there were even wisps of invisible mist being emitted from it, dispersing in all directions. Time passed day by day. After 7 by 749 Re, the liquid ball had been compressed and condensed into a palm-sized talisman. It was as thin as a card, but as soft as cotton. It floated in the gray Taoist fire. This talisman emitted a golden brilliance. On its surface, there was a pattern that was so complicated that it would make people dizzy. At the same time, it was also very meaningful. It looked very sacred and extremely mysterious. Luo Fan, who had not stopped refining after 7 by 749 Re, let out a long breath. He raised his hand, and the talisman floated into his hand. As he clenched his right hand, the Taoist fire wrapped around it instantly collapsed and eventually disappeared without a trace. After the Tao fire disappeared, the powerful suction force that had been in his body for the past 49 Re suddenly disappeared. The chaotic vital qi no longer surged into his body. Instead, it dissipated in all directions and gradually filled the cave. Obviously, after 49 days of continuous refinement by the Taoist fire, coupled with the countless talismans that he had put in, this magic weapon had been completed. After sensing it slightly, the layers of restrictions contained in this talisman appeared in his mind. 36. This was the number of restrictions contained in this talisman. These restrictions were exactly the same as the yellow turbaned strongman emperor. Of course, in fact, the power of the two was similar to a certain extent. They were both only one step away from becoming magic treasures. Although, because of the different directions, the power of the two could not be compared after they became magic treasures. Of course, even though it seemed like a small step, it was definitely not an easy step to cross. Like the Void Wuji Palace, they could obtain mysterious materials like the Primordial Chaos Stone, refine them, and integrate them into it. Then, they would naturally become magic treasures. Otherwise, they could only rely on a long time to nourish and refine it. Finally, it would give birth to a treasure spirit of its own. Only then could it become a magic treasure. During this period of time, even if they spent all their effort on it, it would take at least several yuanhui. Luo Fan held this talisman and felt the power of the talisman. He was very satisfied. He was not in the mood to nourish and refine it. Relatively speaking, the power of this talisman was enough for him to use. This talisman contained 36 restrictions. It had completely integrated and strengthened the light that was separated from the body of the god of Buzhou Mountain. At this moment, this talisman represented the control authority of the top of Buzhou Mountain. It even had a certain processing ability, just like a computer. Luo Fan only needed to input a little bit of his will. He did not even need to think about how to achieve it, and this talisman would automatically change the top of Buzhou Mountain. In the blink of an eye, it would transform into the shape he wanted. Luo Fan's mind moved. He inserted his will into this talisman. In an instant, a golden light appeared in his mind. Through this golden light, Luo Fan felt that there seemed to be something far above him that had an extremely close connection with him. A feeling of extreme longing to converge with that thing filled the entire ball of light, and along with Luo Fan's thoughts, it was conveyed to his mind. So this is the restriction. Fortunately, I did not absorb it into my body. Luo Fan's mind moved. He got out of this state and his senses returned to normal. The feeling of extreme longing to go up was naturally brought about by this talisman. It represented the influence of the divine light of the god of Buzhou Mountain. If he absorbed it into his body, the person who was longing to go up to the top of Buzhou Mountain would probably become Luo Fan. Chapter 71. He raised his hand and waved it lightly. The golden talisman had already rushed straight into the universe in his sleeve and was stored away. After collecting the talismans, Luo Fan's body flashed, and he appeared outside the cave. He raised his head and looked at the location of Buzhou Mountain God. He could feel an extremely mysterious aura emanating from there, shooting straight into the sky. This mysterious aura seemed to have a close connection with Buzhou Mountain, but it also seemed to have a vague but increasingly strong repulsion with Buzhou Mountain. As soon as he sensed this mysterious aura, Luo Fan understood that the god of Buzhou Mountain was practicing the great way of God and the transcending art of God at the same time. Only in this way could such an aura be emitted from that location. If you weren't the god of Buzhou Mountain, I would have taken you in as my disciple. What a pity. Luo Fan sighed inwardly after he sensed it. The decision of the god of Buzhou Mountain to cultivate both the Great Tao technique and the Transcendence technique at the same time was undoubtedly the correct one. The Great Tao law and the Transcendent formula seemed to be completely different or even contradictory. It seemed that one was strengthening the power of the gods, making the connection between the gods and their duties closer, while the other was allowing the cultivator to transcend the duties of the gods, breaking away from the restrictions of the duties and becoming more powerful. You are at ease. But in fact, the two of them could go hand in hand to a certain extent. The Great Tao could increase the strength and realm of the gods, allowing them to reach the peak of the heavenly god level. On the other hand, the Transcendence technique provided the opportunity to transcend. Naturally, one had to reach the peak in order to surpass the Transcendence technique. From the looks of it, these two techniques were essentially increasing the cultivator's strength and realm. If they were to cultivate at the same time, although there was the danger of mutually rejecting each other at the same time, if one could grasp the relationship between them and grasp a delicate balance, then the progress of both would be greatly improved. It would also allow cultivators to have a deeper understanding of the nature of these two cultivation methods. And that was exactly what the god of Buzhou Mountain was doing. It was also because of this that Luo Fan felt that it was such a pity. After all, to be able to instinctively know how to cultivate two cultivation methods to achieve the best results, this kind of cultivation talent was really eye-catching. Sighing, Luo Fan could only suppress this feeling of pity in the depths of his heart. Just as he was about to move forward, he suddenly felt something calling out to him. After observing for a while, Luo Fan couldn't help but reveal a strange smile. He seemed helpless, as if he didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but he also seemed a little warm. He raised his left hand and opened his sleeve. A transparent, fist-sized, three-dimensional talisman that was outlined by countless complicated and mysterious lines rushed out of his sleeve. It floated in front of him, moving up and down. It was very stable and mysterious. There was a tiny, dust-like figure of an infant in the middle of the talisman. The infant was pink and rosy, looking extremely cute. At the moment, the infant was floating around in the fist-sized talisman. It looked very happy. When the talisman suddenly appeared in front of Luo Fan, the infant showed an instinctive smile. He opened his arms and giggled. "Daddy, Daddy." Luo Fan heard the voice coming from the 3-meter-wide space opened up in the talisman. Naturally, he also heard the infant's cute voice. This talisman was formed by the midday rest technique, and the infant was naturally formed by the heavy turbidine talisman, which had turned yin into yang. It was Luo Fan's cheap son. The call that he had sensed earlier was the instinctive call of his cheap son after he woke up from a deep sleep. After some calculations, it had been several decades since his cheap son had entered the midday rest technique. It was indeed about time for him to wake up. With a complicated expression, he raised his hand and clenched it lightly. The talisman formed by the midday rest technique instantly collapsed and turned into a wave of connate vitality. Like rivers flowing into the ocean, It directly entered the infant's body and instantly turned into a wave of vitality energy. It strengthened the infant's body, causing it to grow dozens of times bigger in just a breath's time. Originally, after the midday rest technique collapsed, the infant had already returned to its original size, the size of a thumb. Now, after the connate vitality rushed into it, its size grew again. In the blink of an eye, it had already reached the size of a normal infant. This size made it look even cuter and made one feel even more sorry for it. "Daddy, Daddy," the infant giggled. It didn't seem to care about its sudden increase in size, or perhaps it didn't understand the fact that it had suddenly grown bigger. After it appeared, it opened its arms and wanted Luo Fan to hug it, transforming it into connate vitality to strengthen the living being that was resting inside was not the power of the midday rest technique itself. The reason this power appeared at this moment was because the energy that formed the talisman itself was Luo Fan's mana. It was created from the mana unit that already possessed limitless power and was extremely mysterious. Therefore, with just a thought, he could change the talisman at will, causing the nature of the talisman to change according to his needs. Therefore, this kind of power that originally did not exist would appear on the spherical talisman created by the midday rest technique. Of course, the reason why this power could produce such a powerful effect was because the baby had stayed in the midday rest spell for several decades. As a result, every shred of connate origin chi and energy in the space had been subconsciously absorbed by him, and without him realizing it, he had left his mark on it. Hugging an infant was something that Luo Fan had never done before. Even if he had seen it before and knew how to carry an infant in theory, how could he immediately put it into practice? As the infant floated towards him with its arms outstretched, Luo Fan, who had already attained the fruit of the earthly immortal realm and had also become the teacher of the sage and the master of heaven and earth, was at a loss as to what to do. He hugged the infant in a fluster and almost let it dangle upside down. He couldn't get into the normal posture that he remembered. Ha ha! The infant wasn't afraid at all despite being tossed around like this. Instead, it found it very interesting and giggled. The joy that came from the bottom of its heart made Luo Fan both happy and anxious. He almost broke out in a cold sweat. Hugging an infant is so troublesome. Luo Fan finally couldn't take it anymore. He raised his hand, and the chaotic vital energy in the cave behind him instantly surged out and gathered between his hands. It compressed and condensed into a gray cloud that wrapped around the infant's body and supported him. Only then did Luo Fan escape from that awkward state. "This won't do. I have to find some people to help take care of him. Otherwise, I'm afraid that in a few years, this kid will be tortured to death by me." Luo Fan looked at the infant in the cloud that was still reaching out to Luo Fan and felt helpless. After some thought, Luo Fan decided on the babysitter for the infant. In reality, he didn't have many choices. It was obviously impossible to let a magic treasure or artifact take care of the infant. Who knew if the infant's personality would develop into a magic treasure or artifact after he was carried out? Taking care of my son on my behalf is a great opportunity for you. Who knows, if you take good care of him in the future, I might even take you as my disciples. Luo Fan thought to himself, you don't seem to have a name yet. Since you become my son, your surname should be Luo. As for your name, let's call you Luo Fu." Suddenly, Luo Fan thought of an awkward problem and quickly made a decision. Chapter 72. It had been tens of thousands of years since Luo Fan had arrived in the untainted world, but he had only met 5 or 6 beings with spiritual awareness. Among them, the only one who had a conflict with him and was subdued by him was the Yin-Yang Flood Dragon, who was guarding the innate, inextinguishable spiritual light more than 2 million miles away from Buzhou Mountain. With a thought, Luo Fan took Luo Fu, who was wrapped in a gray cloud, and turned into a rainbow, rushing toward the west. After a short while, they had already arrived more than 10,000 li away, in the area that had been sealed by the Limitless Void Palace. The Limitless Void Palace had sealed the surrounding area. It could block all disturbances from the outside world but it had no effect on Luo Fan. He landed next to the primordial chi source and glanced at Hong Jun. He found that Hong Jun was still absorbing the primordial chi to cultivate the indomitable heaven and earth technique to increase his cultivation. It seemed to be quite smooth. He was relieved. With a thought, he had entered the spirit space inside the Wuji Void Palace. This mini Kiliacosm was boundless. After several upgrades, it now looked more like a complete world. The land that was tens of millions of miles below was suspended in the void. There were all kinds of terrains on it, including oceans and lakes. It looked full of vitality and beautiful scenery. It was a perfect resort. When he arrived here, Luo Fan felt that the primordial chi he had entered was very thin. It made him a little uncomfortable, but there was a feeling of absolute control that made him feel very comfortable. This kind of complicated and strange feeling was naturally formed because he had stayed in the untainted world for too long. He had adapted to the concentration of primordial chi in the untainted world, and he was the creator of this spirit space. He raised his hand and gently guided the cloud that wrapped around Luo Fu a little. It gently attracted Luo Fu's attention to the mysterious scene in the Wuji Void Palace. Luo Fu was a baby. Sometimes he was very stubborn. Except for his goal, he didn't care about anything around him. Sometimes he was very fickle. With just a small change, he could immediately forget everything before and start to pay attention to new things. At this time, Luo Fu's attention was attracted by this. Giggle. Luo Fu wandered in the cloud, observing this novel world. He laughed joyfully. His lively and lovely appearance made Luo Fan feel infected. With a thought, the void moved automatically. Luo Fan had already brought Luo Fu to the platform in the Thunderbolt pool. The two yin-yang flood dragons were suppressed by Luo Fan in the depths of the lightning pool. According to the time inside the limitless Void Palace, it had been more than 10,000 years since then. After such a long period of time, even if the two flood dragons hadn't forgotten their hatred for Luo Fan, their hatred shouldn't have been as deep as it had been for a long time. Luo Fan raised his hand and grabbed. The Thunderbolt pool surged. A spherical, dusky crystal ball rushed out, breaking free from the suppression of the lightning pool, arriving in front of him. It spun, revealing a bit of profoundness. Inside the gray crystal ball, there were countless talismans constantly flowing, turning into chains that tightly bound the two flood dragons. The two flood dragons completely lost control of their bodies and energy. They were like mosquitoes trapped in amber, frozen in the crystal ball. With a thought, Luo Fan raised his hand and covered it. The crystal ball instantly collapsed and turned into a big ball of powder. The rich, chaotic chi of the three was instantly absorbed by the Wuji Void Palace and disappeared without a trace. In front of Luo Fan, everything became clear again. The two flood dragons lost their restraints, and their bodies expanded dramatically. In the blink of an eye, they had already returned to their true size. The black and white flood dragons, which were tens of thousands of meters long and hundreds of meters in diameter, hovered in the air, expanding and contracting. An extremely powerful aura emanated from them. As soon as the two dragons appeared, they roared to the sky. The sound was almost tangible, and it reverberated in the top hall. Looking at the two powerful dragons wreaking havoc, Luo Fu did not have a trace of fear. Instead, he seemed to be very interested. He opened his hands as if he wanted to hug the dragons. He laughed and said, I want. Luo Fan saw this and was very proud of his choice. It seemed that Luo Fu really liked these two dragons. It was really a wise decision to let them be his nanny. At that moment, the two WRMS were still roaring, and their voices were gradually filled with confusion and bewilderment. It seemed that they did not understand the current situation. Luo Fan's mind moved, and a mental cultivation method mnemonic chant flowed through his mind. Following this mental cultivation method mnemonic chant, he felt that his mind and the two flood dragons' minds were completely connected. This was his mind-reading technique. Where's this? Why are we here? It was the voice of the male dragon. We seem to have been robbed once. What was robbed? It was the voice of the female dragon. Luo Fan heard this. As he expected, the two dragons' spiritual consciousness was not complete. Therefore, their memory was really limited. After being sealed for tens of thousands of years, they really had forgotten about the innate, inextinguishable spiritual light. This caused him to rejoice in his heart. Although even if they remembered about the innate, inextinguishable spiritual light, he still had a way to make them good nannies for Luo Fu. However, it was still troublesome. This was naturally the best situation. With a thought, countless complex and abstruse characters and patterns instantly flowed through his mind. They quickly condensed and turned into a mysterious dual cultivation technique. Golden Dragon Transformation Technique was the name of this technique. This technique was very mysterious. It required two dragons to cultivate together. It was called dual cultivation. This kind of dual cultivation was not the same as what men and women did in bed in the future. Instead, it was a more mysterious and profound cultivation method that was filled with endless mysteries. Cultivating this technique could make the bodies of the dragons even tougher and more mysterious. In the end, they could evolve into dragons. In addition, if the male and female flood dragons were to cultivate this cultivation technique together, they would obtain a special ability, and that was to be able to intersect their heads and tails to form a huge pair of golden scissors that could cut through everything in the world, all tangible and intangible things. This power, of course, was the inspiration that Luo Fan obtained from the legendary golden dragon scissors. It was also a small restriction that he left on the two dragons. After all, he had a hand over Luo Fu to them. No matter how much he trusted them, they were once enemies, so he had to be on guard. With this cultivation method, they would be able to cultivate their own Dharma treasures, and they would be able to control them. That was already the best restriction. With a point of his finger, the cultivation method condensed into a speck of light and suddenly rushed out. It split into two and rushed into the foreheads of the black and white flood dragons, fusing with their memories. Good technique. I met a good person. Great. I have a technique to cultivate. The two flood dragons received the spiritual light transmitted by Luo Fan and instantly understood the profoundness of the golden flood dragon transformation Tao. An indescribable joy was transmitted into Luo Fan's heart through his mind connection. Luo Fan smiled slightly. He was very satisfied. Although this cultivation method had some limitations, it was still an exquisite cultivation method. Its power was quite astonishing, and it was specially created for these two flood dragons. These two flood dragons did not cultivate cultivation methods and only knew how to attack with brute force. It would be strange if they did not like it. Chapter 73. I have countless similar techniques. Are the two of you willing to become my mountain guardian divine beasts under my wing? If you are willing, you can choose this cultivation method at will, and your strength will improve greatly. Luo Fan transmitted this thought into the minds of the black and white water dragons. Everyone had already seen how naive and gullible those two flood dragons were. Luo Fan's thoughts were transmitted. The result was obvious without even looking at it. Good, good. The male and female voices were transmitted into Luo Fan's mind almost at the same time, and there was even a sense of joy and excitement. It was as if they were afraid that if they agreed too slowly, Luo Fan would change his mind. But guardian beasts, what are they? Then, the female water dragon shyly transmitted this thought. When Luo Fan felt this thought, he was very happy. In this way, everything would go smoothly. He transmitted all the things that a nanny should do into the minds of the two water dragons. Luo Fan's theoretical knowledge about nannies was naturally very rich. It was what he had heard and seen on Earth. It was just that it was a little difficult for him to put these theories into practice. Therefore, he believed that the knowledge that was transmitted into the minds of the two water dragons was enough for them to take care of Luo Fu until he could grow up and be independent. So this is what the guardian beasts do. It's very simple. Of course, the words that the black and white water dragons used were not the same, but the meaning was the same. Seeing that they agreed, Luo Fan was really happy. With the incomplete spiritual consciousness of the two water dragons, it was naturally not possible for them to be Luo Fu's nannies. Therefore, he had to keep them here to cultivate for a period of time. At least, they had to have a human form and a complete spiritual consciousness. For Luo Fan, the concentration of vitality in this Wuji palace was far from enough. At most, it could only help him improve a little. But for the black and white water dragons, whose strength and realm were far inferior to his, this was already a cultivation saint. In an instant, Luo Fan had already made a judgment. The cultivation environment here is excellent. The two of you can cultivate well here. I hope the two of you will be able to achieve something soon. Luo Fan raised his hand and waved. The everlasting void palace changed. Yes, Master. The two flood dragons got into the zone very quickly and changed their words in the blink of an eye. Luo Fan didn't care about them. He controlled the limitless palace to produce its own mystical changes. In the blink of an eye, when the time inside the top hall became 365 times the normal time, the time outside the top hall became normal, which was the same as the time in the primordial world. Subsequently, he took a step forward and left the two WRMs to cultivate the golden WRM dragon transformation Dao above the pool of lightning, whereas he himself brought along Luo Fu, who was enveloped by the gray clouds, and left the top hall. In about half a year's time, they will be able to cultivate a complete spiritual consciousness and then transform. Luo Fan thought to himself. The half a year's time he mentioned naturally referred to the primordial world outside the top hall. For the black and white water dragons, this period of time was probably equivalent to more than 180 years. Giggle, giggle. Daddy, daddy, hug. Luo Fu's cute voice woke Luo Fan up from that state of thinking. This made Luo Fan, who was originally calm and seemed to have everything under control, collapse. But how should I get through this half a year? No matter how worried he was, time would not stop because of him. Time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, half a year had passed. In this half a year's time, Luo Fan was in dire straits. He had just become a father, without any experience and without any psychological preparation. Even if he had rich theoretical knowledge, how could he do it smoothly? Fortunately, Luo Fu was not an ordinary baby, so he would not be tortured to death by Luo Fan's careless care. Instead, he gained indescribable happiness from Luo Fan's various mistakes. In this half a year, he laughed incessantly. At this time, Luo Fan was taking Luo Fu to a cliff. Luo Fan grabbed some clouds and condensed them into various biological forms. He placed them in front of Luo Fu and let Luo Fu play with them. Suddenly, two mysterious auras soared into the sky from the top of Dang Lingju Hall. These two auras intertwined with each other, forming a pillar of light that soared into the sky. Then, the energy in the entire Wuji palace trembled. It was as if a powerful suction force was exploding in the Wuji palace. However, because the Wuji palace was too big, the suction force did not cause too much of an effect. Luo Fan's senses were extremely sharp. In that instant, he discovered that the lightning pool in the depths of the Lingjue Peak Hall was in an uproar. Then, bolts of Earth Divine Thunder burst out from the thunder pool and shot toward Zhongyu. On the other hand, the platform was covered by the dark purple Divine Thunder of Earth Element. There seemed to be something mysterious brewing in it, stretching and vibrating. The two streams of aura that were entangled with each other were coming from that spot. I finally succeeded. When Luo Fan saw it, he knew that the thing he had been waiting for over half a year had finally happened. He was overjoyed. He raised his hand to disperse the clouds and mist, then said to Luo Fu with a smile, "Come, Fu, let Father bring you to meet two fun companions." Although Luo Fan had been through a lot in the past half a year, he had made some progress. At least, he would never have said these words half a year ago. Luo Fu giggled and opened his hands. It was unknown whether he understood what Luo Fan was saying or not. Luo Fan raised his hand and waved. Then, he and Luo Fu arrived at the depths of the top hall of the Lingjue Peak Hall. They floated above the lightning pool and looked at the changes that were brewing on the platform. Naturally, The divine thunder of Earth element could not block Luo Fan's vision. At this moment, the male and female flood dragons had shrunk to over 10,000 times their original size. Both of them were only 10 feet long, entangled with each other on the platform like two pythons. They kept wriggling and emitting a mysterious aura. The surrounding thunder pool was rocking and rolling, with thunder water rippling and releasing bolts of dark purple earth divine thunders towards them, constantly bombarding their bodies. The power of the divine earth thunder of Wutu was quite shocking, especially when it was coexisting with the Wuji Palace. It naturally carried a mysterious aura, making its power even stronger. Enveloped and bombarded by the divine earth thunder of Wutu, the bodies of the black and white Jiao dragons were constantly being damaged and healed. The whole process seemed to be simple and violent, yet it seemed to contain some kind of profound secrets. Luo Fan's mind moved, and a mental cultivation method's mnemonic chant flowed through his mind. Suddenly, two beams of golden light shot out from his eyes, covering the entire platform. It was the magic that allowed him to see through the formation and see through the origin. As the golden light shrouded him, he instantly saw the energy changes in the bodies of the black and white flood dragons. At this moment, the chaotic energy in their bodies, which was so dense that it was almost compressed into a substance, was constantly being twisted and broken apart as their bodies were being reborn. It then condensed into another mysterious energy. This mysterious energy had different appearances in the bodies of the male and female flood dragons. In the body of the female flood dragon, it was black. In the body of the male flood dragon, it was white. The two came from the same place, but had different forms. They had different characteristics, with a slight distinction between yin and yang. Chapter 74. The quality of the black and white energy, which was slightly yin and yang, was extremely high. It was not inferior to the mysterious yin energy in Hongjuan's body at all. The black and white energy constantly replaced the energy in the bodies of the black and white Jiao dragons, enriching their bodies. As the energy continued to increase and replace each other, the two black and white flood dragons also began to change, gradually transforming from flood dragons to divine dragons. After half a day, the black and white Jiao dragons with the body of a snake, the legs of a lizard, the claws of an eagle, the tail of a snake, the antlers of a deer, the scales of a fish, the whiskers at the corners of their mouths, and the pearls on their foreheads had completely replaced the original two Jiao dragons. Roar! Two loud dragon roars resounded through the heavens and the earth. After that, the bodies of the two black and white divine dragons that were curled up on the platform shook and dispersed the countless divine lightning of earth element that were assaulting the platform. Then, clouds and mist appeared around their bodies and carried them up into the sky. As they soared into the sky, a very violent aura emanated from the two Jiao dragons. It was so overwhelming that it made people feel awe from the bottom of their hearts. Of course, this was not the case for Luo Fan. It took 200 years for the golden Jiao dragon to transform into a dragon. Luo Fan looked up at the black and white Jiao dragons that had expanded to a length of tens of thousands of feet, wrapped in clouds and mist, and let out a long sigh. Although he did not transform into an innate Taoism aptitude, transforming into a Jiao dragon was still the same. Dragons could be big or small, and they could rise or hide. When they were big, they could breathe out clouds and mist. When they were small, they could hide themselves. When they rose, they could soar into the universe. And when they hid, they could hide within the waves. With such great power, transforming into a human was naturally a small matter. As expected, the two Jiao dragons let out a long roar of joy in the sky. After chasing each other for a while, they suddenly turned into black and white rays of light and fell to the ground. In the blink of an eye, they condensed into a man and a woman who were about 15 or 16 years old. The man and woman were like a golden boy and a jade girl. Both of them were covered in makeup and looked extremely beautiful and adorable. However, on their foreheads, there were two antlers that looked very soft and delicate, telling others that they were not normal people. "Thank you, Master, for bestowing the technique upon us." The Golden Boy and Jade Girl bowed to Luo Fan the moment they appeared. Their voices were crisp and clear. The gratitude contained within them was absolutely from the bottom of their hearts. Moreover, based on their conversation and performance, it was obvious that they already possessed complete spiritual sense. Obviously, the benefits of the Golden Serpent Dragon transformation, Dao, were unimaginably great to them. Luo Fan descended with Luo Fu and stood in front of the two of them. He looked at them and nodded to himself. "This is because the two of you are extremely talented. Otherwise, although this cultivation method is mysterious, it would not have allowed the two of you to improve so much in such a short time." "Ha! Ha!" Luo Fu, who was watching from the side, was extremely interested. Now that he landed on the ground, he began to chuckle. With a crisp sound, he controlled the cloud and floated forward. In a short while, he arrived in front of the golden couple. Over the past half a year, Luo Fan had modified the cloud around Luo Fu several times for convenience. Through his modifications, the cloud already possessed a trace of the power of a magic tool. It could be used as a means of transportation to travel around, and it could also change its form slightly. "Greetings, young master." The Dragon Boy and Dragon Girl that the black and white water dragons had transformed into hurriedly bowed. They did not dare to be careless because of Luo Fu's young age. The Dragon Girl's eyes shone brightly, and her gaze towards Luo Fu was filled with love. Hug. Luo Fu's senses were sharp, and he could tell how the two people in front of him treated him. He chuckled and stretched out his arms towards the girl. The black and white water dragon's spiritual awareness had only just been replenished, but they had long since remembered everything Luo Fan had said about what the guardian beast should do. As soon as they saw Luo Fu, they knew that taking care of this young master was their most important task and did not dare to be negligent. The girl extended her arms with great joy and gently picked up Luo Fu. Her movements were even more precise and gentle than Luo Fan's, making Luo Fu feel very comfortable, and a happy smile appeared on his face. Luo Fan was satisfied when he saw this, and knew that he had made the right decision in letting the black and white water dragons be his nanny. Fortunately, this was the case. Otherwise, if Luo Fan had continued to take care of Luo Fu, he would have doubted whether he would have the time to cultivate after he grew up. According to Luo Fan's observation, based on the speed of Luo Fu's growth over the years, Luo Fu's entire childhood would take at least tens of thousands of years. How would he bear this? "Do the two of you have names?" Suddenly, Luo Fan remembered that he did not know the names of the black and white water dragons, and did not know how to address them. So he hurriedly asked, "Master, my name is Ao Lai, and she is Ao Een." The dragon male who did not carry Luo Fu quickly replied respectfully. Luo Fan nodded to show that he understood, and said, "Oh, Lai, Ao Een, the two of you will take good care of the young master from now on. I can give you the authority to enter and leave the everlasting palace. This place is the top palace, and I have already arranged a place for you two to stay. You can take the young master to play. The yellow scarf warrior will tell you what to do." "Understood." Ao Lai and Ao Een did not dare to be negligent, and quickly agreed. Looking at Luo Fu, who was so happy that he almost forgot about him, Luo Fan let out a sigh of relief. He waved his hand and moved through the void. Ao Lai, Ao Een, and Luo Fu disappeared in front of him. In the blink of an eye, they went to the front palace of the top palace. With a thought, the yellow scarf warrior who was busy in the top palace had already accepted Luo Fan's intention. He knew that the sudden appearance of the few extra people in the palace were the palace's guests, and they needed to serve them. One of the yellow scarf warriors went up to greet them, guided them around the top palace, and confirmed their respective residences. In fact, it was just for show. According to Luo Fan's understanding, it was difficult for Ao Lai and Ao Een to have time to live in the palace. After paying attention for a while, Luo Fan was relieved, and with a thought, he stepped out of the everlasting palace. It was only half a year, and Hong Jun was still cultivating. looking no different from before. Using the power to see through the origin, he found that Hong Jun's condition was very good, so he did not take him seriously. He took a step, and his body turned into a long rainbow, flying up. Now that he had the authority to control the top of Buzhou Mountain, and he had refined it into a talisman, it was time to make some arrangements on the top of Buzhou Mountain. The top of Buzhou Mountain was 100,000 miles away from the ground. With Luo Fan's perception range of 20,000 miles, he could not know what was on the top of the mountain. Therefore, at this time, Luo Fan was quite curious about the top of Buzhou Mountain. He turned straight up and released his perception along the way. Everything within 20,000 miles was included in his mind, and he carefully observed the various mysterious scenes on Buzhou Mountain. Buzhou Mountain was the backbone of Pangu and the primordial sky pillar. The cultivation environment was the most wonderful in the world, but it did not mean that the scenery was very beautiful. The chaotic vitality chi on the mountain was almost endless. As the mountain went higher, the number of chaotic vitality chi sources increased. With the passage of time, within the range of Luo Fan's perception of 20,000 miles, these chaotic energy sources became more and more concentrated. When he directly rushed over 20,000 miles, he could no longer see any gaps in his perception of chaotic energy sources. As the number of chaotic vitality chi sources increased, Buzhou Mountain became more and more desolate. At the foot of the mountain, there were all sorts of mysterious and lush plants growing. Although they were not complete due to the contamination of the chaotic yuan chi, their exuberant vitality could be sensed by anyone. By the time they reached the 20,000-kilometer mark, all they could see was a stretch of grayish mountain rocks that had been tempered by the primal chaos chi. In the future, these would be treasures that were hard to find even with money. But at this time, they were common goods that could only be barely calculated with numbers in the hundreds of millions of tons. Although Luo Fan had the intention to investigate this Mount Buzhou in order to find some precious materials to refine or improve his cultivation base, he was more concerned about the situation at the top of Mount Buzhou. Thus, he did not stop. His figure turned into a long rainbow, and his speed was very fast. He passed through the mountain, but did not enter, and directly rushed to the top of Mount Buzhou. Chapter 75. From the foot of the mountain to the top, Buzhou Mountain was 100,000 miles long. From the untainted land, it plunged straight into the layer of astral wind, thunder, and fire 90,000 miles above the ground, and finally reached the mysterious, endless starry sky above. The long rainbow that Luo Fan had transformed into rushed straight up. Along the way, no matter how mysterious the scenery was, he didn't stop. After a short while, he had already rushed up 90,000 miles, directly entering the astral wind, lightning, and fire layer. The layer of astral wind, thunder, and fire was divided into 9 layers, distributed in the sky above the entire untainted land, like a protective layer. Each layer was 1,000 miles thick. Although it was composed of astral wind, thunder, fire, and other kinds of energy, the higher it was, the more mysterious it became. However, relatively speaking, Buzhou Mountain was even more mysterious. It plunged straight into the layer of astral wind, thunder, and fire, and was not repelled or even attacked like other objects that entered the layer of astral wind, thunder, and fire. Within a radius of tens of thousands of miles around Buzhou Mountain, the layer of astral wind, thunder, and fire seemed to be pushed away by a mysterious invisible force, leaving a huge empty space that could not be approached within 10,000 miles of Buzhou Mountain. In this empty space, there was no astral wind, thunder, or fire, but there was an incomparably dense chaotic energy which filled every inch of space in the entire empty space. The moment the rainbow transformed by Luo Fan rushed into the layer of astral wind, thunder, and fire, he felt his whole body suddenly become heavy. The speed of the rainbow instantly slowed down by 10 times. Although it was still extremely fast compared to before, it was like a snail. The moment the rainbow entered the layer of astral wind, thunder, and fire, the boundless and unyielding aura that was constantly emitted by Buzhou Mountain seemed to be compressed, and abruptly increased by more than 10 times. The higher one went, the stronger it became. According to Ji Hao's estimation, when he reached the top of the mountain, the aura would be at least 100 times stronger than that at the bottom. The cultivation method that Luo Fan cultivated was derived from the form of Buzhou Mountain and had a very mysterious connection with the aura emitted by Buzhou Mountain. Shrouded by this terrifyingly desolate and unyielding aura, he felt as if his soul had been tempered by a kind of gentle and lasting tempering. It felt both bitter and comfortable. At the same time, his perception of his surroundings became more and more acute. His range of perception, which was the reflection of the outside world in his mind, had shrunk by more than 10 times as a result. It had shrunk from the original 20,000 kilometers to 2,000 kilometers, and it continued to shrink as his body continued to rise. As expected, Luo Fan thought to himself. He wasn't disappointed or surprised at all. He had already anticipated that the situation would change after entering the astral wind lightning fire layer. Although this change was beyond his imagination, it wasn't to the extent of disappointing him. At this height, the primal chaos energy source no longer mattered. The entire Buzhou Mountain was a huge chaotic energy source that constantly emitted a steady stream of chaotic energy. The surrounding chaotic energy, which was so thick that it almost blocked one's sight, was emitted from any part of the mountain. When things reached an extreme, they would move in the opposite direction. At this point, the Buzhou Mountain, which was almost covered by the chaotic energy, didn't look so desolate anymore. Almost at every distance, there were all kinds of strange plants growing, and there were many obscure life forces breeding in various places, which added a kind of vitality to the Buzhou Mountain. It wasn't desolate anymore, where there were only mountains and rocks. With just one look, Luo Fan knew that these were the embryonic forms of innate gods. Of course, they were just embryonic forms. They were formed because of the mysteriousness of Buzhou Mountain. When such a mysterious Buzhou Mountain rose to the height of the astral wind lightning fire layer, because of the existence of the astral wind lightning fire layer, and because of the envelopment and oppression of the astral wind lightning fire layer, it barely maintained the environment of the time when the world was created. Although the chaotic energy was not as thick as the time when the world was created, it was enough to breed innate gods. However, it was hard to say how many of these plants and life forces could eventually breed innate gods. According to Luo Fan's guess, the probability was not more than 1 in 1,000. After all, it wasn't the time when the world was created. No matter how well the environment was maintained, it was still different in essence. Luo Fan didn't stop to observe and comprehend these plants and life forces, because he knew that if he stopped to comprehend slowly, it would take him hundreds or even thousands of years to reach the top of Buzhou Mountain. Anyway, he had plenty of time in the future, and he didn't want to cause unnecessary trouble at this time. It was more important to reach the top of Buzhou Mountain first. The rainbow he transformed into continue to go up. Suddenly, when he reached the height of the 9th layer of the astral wind lightning fire layer, he suddenly felt that something in his sleeve was shaking violently. With a thought, the rainbow condensed again, and a young man wearing a grayish-brown robe came out. He floated in the void, raised his hand, and the shaking thing flew into his hand. It was golden, as big as a palm, and as thick as a card. However, it was very soft and light. It was the spiritual talisman that had fused with the god's spiritual sense of Buzhou Mountain. At this moment, the spiritual talisman was shaking violently, and the golden light flashing on it was expanding and contracting, twisting and changing shape. Looking at this situation, Luo Fan understood. He had reached the limit of the authority granted by the god of Buzhou Mountain. When he immersed his mind in it, he felt very satisfied, very safe, and more at ease. With a thought, he had a rough idea of the top of Buzhou Mountain. His body sank, and through the chaotic energy, he landed on a piece of chaos crystal on the top of the mountain. With another thought, the mountain moved slightly and the void shifted. The piece of chaos crystal disappeared with his body, leaving behind a hole with a diameter of 3 meters. At this time, Luo Fan had already been sent to the top of Mount Buzhou through a mechanism that existed in the unseen world. This place was like a huge island. It was slightly protruding and had a circumference of over 10,000 miles. The endless starry sky above seemed like it was right above their heads. An incomparably heavy pressure came from above, and a vast and unyielding aura had almost condensed into a solid form. As soon as he appeared here, Luo Fan felt an extremely strong pressure on his soul. An extremely heavy pressure, an extremely heavy responsibility, and a feeling that the entire world was pressing down on him, as if the safety of the entire world was placed on him, appeared in his mind. The rich, chaotic energy at the top of the mountain stuck closely to the ground and appeared to be in a state between a liquid and a solid state. This made the top of the mountain not look like a mountain, but like an ocean. It looked like it had been enduring an indescribably terrifying pressure for a long period of time. The piece of chaos crystal that Luo Fan was standing on suddenly sank when it appeared and instantly smashed into the ground. It sank into the chaotic energy that was in a state between a liquid and a solid state, and with a spin, it disappeared without a trace. At this moment, the spiritual talisman suddenly floated up and stopped 3 feet above Luo Fan's head. It emitted a golden light and covered Luo Fan's body, as if it was fixing his body in place, and also as if it was isolating something. At this moment, Luo Fan did not care about his own state at all. His mind had completely fallen into an unprecedented state of shock. He looked up, and his eyes flashed with the light of understanding. His body emitted an extremely mysterious aura, and it seemed to fuse with the vast and unyielding aura around him, which had almost solidified into a solid state. It seemed like they were fusing with each other, and also seemed to be communicating and exchanging something. So this place has already entered the endless starry sky. Luo Fan understood something in his heart. Chapter 76. Above Luo Fan's head, the starry sky pressed down like a curtain that blotted out the sky and the earth. Endless starlight shone down from the sky, enveloping the top of the mountain with a circumference of 1,000 miles and stirring up the chaotic energy on the mountaintop. At this moment, Luo Fan's perception range had been compressed to less than 100 miles. In his mind, he could only reflect the scene within 100 miles. Compared to the ground, his perception range had been compressed by more than 200 times. However, with this range of perception of 100 miles, he was still able to include the entire starry sky in his mind from a vertical angle. The starry sky did not seem to have any length or width. No matter how broad his perception range was, he could not penetrate the endless starry sky and see beyond the world. However, no matter how narrow his perception range was, he could still see the end of the endless starry sky and the edge of the world. It was mysterious and wonderful beyond words. Buzhou Mountain cut through the 9 layers of astral wind, lightning, and fire, and finally reached the endless starry sky. Countless stars in the starry sky were emitting extremely dense starry energy, which constantly shone toward Buzhou Mountain. The silver light shone brightly, and the cold air was eerie. Luo Fan stood there quietly, looking at the distant, deep, and extremely mysterious starry sky. An indescribable feeling of heroism surged in his heart, and he felt like he was gradually becoming one with it. At this moment, the entire world seemed to be under his control. Although the endless starry energy was dense, in terms of quality, it was only equivalent to innate energy. It had almost no effect on the cultivation environment on the top of Buzhou Mountain. The talisman above Luo Fan's head emitted a golden light, protecting Luo Fan's figure. It seemed to be communicating with the entire top of Buzhou Mountain in some obscure and unpredictable way. An inexplicable aura was gradually emitted from it. It was as if the talisman was gradually becoming one with the top of Buzhou Mountain. On the other hand, Luo Fan himself was gradually stimulated by the deep and distant feeling of the endless starry sky and the boundless, unyielding feeling of the Buzhou Mountain below. His mind entered an extremely mysterious state where he was neither human nor self. Endless spiritual sparks flashed violently in his mind. They were like little stars, appearing and disappearing at the same time. All kinds of inexplicable comprehensions flashed across his mind. For a moment, Luo Fan seemed to have comprehended countless profound and indescribable mysteries, but also seemed to have comprehended nothing. After an unknown period of time, Luo Fan's mind shook, and he awoke from that mysterious state of enlightenment. As soon as he woke up, he felt an indescribable joy welling up in his heart. The moment he woke up, he knew that the range of his perception had doubled. Furthermore, the magic power in his body had more than doubled. Unknowingly, the number of 129,600 three-dimensional talismans that made up the magic power had doubled, becoming as many as 259,200. However, the energy seemed to have split into two, causing the feeling of emptiness to become even more intense. It even made him feel that his power seemed to have decreased by a lot, but this did not stop him from feeling happy. Luo Fan sensed it and knew that he had unknowingly entered a state similar to an epiphany. Stimulated by the aura of the endless starry sky, stimulated by the rich aura emitted by the Buzhou Mountain, his understanding of the nameless cultivation method had improved. With a slight movement of his mind, the magic power began to circulate in his body according to the nameless cultivation method's route, and his mind was silently reciting the nameless cultivation method's mnemonic chant. As the magic power circulated, the endless chaotic chi under his feet was like a river flowing into the sea, extending into hundreds of streams of chaotic chi. They went straight into his body and completely disappeared. The magic power, which had doubled in strength, continued to twist and disperse the endless chaotic energy. It was continuously purified, and in the end, it was completely swept away. After 81 cycles, all the magic power condensed in his elixir field, condensed into a ball, lively, jumping, and shrinking like a strange fruit. It was the earthly, immortal Tao fruit. This fruit was already significantly larger than the one he had seen in the past, and it appeared to be more complete, more vivid, and more profound. The life essence contained within it had also increased to a level that was visible to the naked eye. However, there was an extreme desire coming from the earthly, immortal Tao fruit, as if it was eager for all the energy that could be absorbed. It was eager to absorb all the chaotic chi that could be found. Luo Fan did not succumb to this desire. He broke away from it with absolute perseverance. He counted with his fingers and knew that when he was in that state, 10 years had passed. After sighing that there was not enough time, Luo Fan sensed the situation of Hong Jun and Luo Fu in the blink of an eye through the Wuji Palace in the void. Hong Jun had already finished his cultivation at this time. He had already mastered the second stage of the Creation Jade archive technique. At this time, he was there to consolidate his realm. And in the Wuji Palace, Luo Fu appeared to be a little unhappy. That expression on his very cute face was very strange. Ao Lai and Ao Yin were constantly coaxing him, jumping up and down, looking very funny. Luo Fan's mind moved. Through the Wuji boy's perception, he already knew the cause and effect. It was 10 years, and Luo Fu was a little tired of playing, but now he really wanted to see him. Luo Fan was touched and helpless at the same time. With a thought, the Wuji Palace instantly released the blockade of the space of 100 miles. It turned into a purple-yellow light, rolled towards Hong Jun, rolled him up, and rushed to the top of Buzhou Mountain at an extremely fast speed. The speed of the Wuji Palace was several times faster than Luo Fan. After a while, it had already crossed 100,000 miles with Hong Jun and arrived at the top of Buzhou Mountain. It stopped in front of Luo Fan and spat out Hong Jun on the ground. Hong Jun was adjusting his breath with his eyes closed, consolidating his progress over the years. Suddenly, he felt his body empty. The chaotic chi that was originally full of around him dispersed and was rolled up by a purple-yellow light. Hong Jun already had experience with this kind of experience, so he naturally did not panic. Instead, he felt a little excited. because this meant that his master wanted to see him, which meant that the cultivation problems that he had accumulated for more than 10 years were going to be solved. When Hong Jun came to the top of Buzhou Mountain, he behaved very strangely. It seemed that he was not used to it, as if he could not bear the burden. He didn't look like he had been living on the top of Buzhou Mountain all the time. This was a little different for what he said before. Luo Fan was a little confused, but he would not let Hong Jun bear the pressure that he could not bear. With a thought, the talisman above his head turned, and a golden light was emitted, covering Hong Jun's body and isolating the strong pressure from the outside world. Greetings, Master. With the protection of the golden light, Hong Jun behaved much more relaxed and bowed to pay his respects. No need to be so polite. Luo Fan waved his hand, and an invisible force helped Hong Jun up. He said, "Stand aside. There are a few people you need to see." Chapter 77. Since Luo Fan had given the order, Hong Jun didn't dare to say anything and stood respectfully at the side. Luo Fan raised his hand and waved. The limitless palace rotated and spat out 3 figures. 2 were big and 1 was small. The big one was like a golden boy and jade girl, and the small one was like the son of Guanyin. All 3 of them were very cute. These 3 people were Dragon Boy Ao Lai, Dragon Girl Ao Yin, and Luo Fan's chief son, Luo Fu. As soon as the 3 of them appeared, they were under the protection of the golden light emitted by the spirit talisman. The golden light condensed and formed a layer of dazzling golden surface beneath their feet, supporting them so that they did not appear too strange in the void. Because they were covered by the golden light, Ao Lai and the others didn't feel the slightest pressure, and their expressions didn't change in the slightest. Ao Lai and Ao Yin were working hard to coax Luo Fu when they suddenly felt the void shift. In the blink of an eye, they were in another world, and their master, Luo Fan, was standing right in front of them. After seeing clearly, they all cried tears of joy and bowed. Through the perception of the limitless boy, Luo Fan already knew that they had suffered all these years. They had been tormented by Luo Fu. While he sympathized in his heart, he also rejoiced inwardly. Father, Father. At this time, Luo Fu had also discovered Luo Fan's existence. He opened his arms, and there was a look of grievance and joy in his eyes. He controlled the chaotic cloud that had become even more agile and rushed toward Luo Fan. In the blink of an eye, he crashed into Luo Fan's arms and hugged him tightly, not letting go in the slightest. Feeling Luo Fu's burning emotions, Luo Fan also felt a faint warmth in his heart. She hugged Luo Fu and patted his back, sending a gentle and warm aura into Luo Fu's body. This didn't have much of an effect, and only made him feel more comfortable. Luo Fu's growth rate was extremely slow. If an ordinary baby had lived for so many years, they would have already become old and frail. However, Luo Fu was still the same as before, looking as if he hadn't grown at all. Father. Luo Fu closed his eyes in satisfaction, a look of extreme satisfaction on his face. This child was born because of me, so he recognized me as his father. In the future, he will be your junior apprentice brother. These 2 people are Yin Yang Divine Dragons. They are the guardian divine beasts of my sect. Their magical powers are difficult to master. You can communicate with them in the future. Luo Fan saw the puzzled look in Hong Jun's eyes and explained. Hong Jun didn't dare to be negligent and quickly saluted. Even if Luo Fu was just an infant, he was no exception. His admiration for Luo Fan had reached the realm of loving the house and its crow. As long as it was related to Luo Fan, he would be extremely respectful. Luo Fan introduced Hong Jun to Ao Lai and Ao Yin. As for Luo Fu, he was just a baby, so he didn't mind. Ao Lai and Ao Yin were in fact Luo Fan's captives. Now that their spiritual senses were more complete, they gradually understood their situation. At this time, seeing that Luo Fan gave them face in front of his disciple, they couldn't help but feel grateful. They didn't mind becoming the guardian divine beasts of Luo Fan's sect as much as before. Hong Jun, Ao Lai, and Ao Yin's spiritual senses were complete, but it was the first time they saw someone with a complete spiritual sense besides Luo Fan. Therefore, they all felt that it was very novel, but they didn't know how to communicate. Luo Fan looked at this scene and knew that these things weren't something he could manage, so he didn't bother. Thinking that Hongjuan's behavior was very different from what he expected, he had a thought and asked, "Disciple Hongjun, where is your cave abode?" Hearing Luo Fan's question, Hongjun didn't dare to be negligent and quickly said, "It's in a cave more than 1,300 kilometers below." "I see." Luo Fan finally understood why Hongjun was in such a difficult situation. Compared to Buzhou Mountain, which was 100,000 kilometers high, the cave more than 1,300 kilometers away from the top could naturally be considered as the top of the mountain. Although it was only a difference of more than 1,300 kilometers, the essence of the two was already completely different. The real top of Buzhou Mountain, which was where Luo Fan was at, was bearing the pressure of the entire endless starry sky and the terrifying pressure of heaven and earth merging. Hongjuan's cave abode was away from the pressure, but it only suffered the aftermath of the pressure, and the strength was almost negligible. This golden talisman only represented the control authority of the top of Buzhou Mountain, which was thousands of kilometers long. Naturally, Luo Fan couldn't set up the cave abode further down. With a thought, the golden light emitted by the talisman fluctuated slightly, and Luo Fan and the others moved through the void and arrived at the edge of Buzhou Mountain. With a thought, he casually rubbed the talisman, and a cave gradually appeared 490 kilometers away from the top of the mountain. This cave wasn't an ordinary cave, but it was simple and unadorned. Its shape and structure contained some kind of mystery, and it was very wide and well lit. There were two sentences on both sides of the main door. "I wish to live forever and live as long as the heavens." There were 3 words above, "Seeking Cave." Luo Fan led the group and landed in front of the cave abode. Looking at the simple cave abode, Luo Fan's mind moved slightly, and an endless amount of chaotic qi gathered toward the cave abode like iron filings attracted by a magnet. In the end, like rivers flowing into the sea, the chaotic qi flowed straight into the cave abode and gradually accumulated into a flowing substance on the ground. It was very soft, but it wasn't real water. When people stepped on it, it was like stepping on a soft carpet, and they wouldn't sink at all. After everyone entered the cave abode, the talisman suddenly rushed into the depths of the cave abode in the blink of an eye and merged into a very inconspicuous corner. The cave abode shook, and dozens of stone rooms automatically formed. With a thought, Luo Fan raised his hand and grabbed at the air. Dozens of huge pieces of chaotic qi, iron instantly separated from the body of Buzhou Mountain and floated in his hand. With a thought, the mantra of the Hercules summoning technique flowed in his mind. A magical power unit suddenly revolved. After circulating 9 times around the mysterious trajectory of the Hercules summoning technique, in his body, it transformed into a wisp of yellow light and gathered in his palm. Then, it suddenly rushed out and transformed into a complicated and mysterious 3-dimensional seal. It continuously collapsed, exploded, and reorganized itself. In the end, it formed 9 layers of inconceivably complicated restrictions, which were inserted into the primal chaos iron one by one. The chaotic qi iron instantly collapsed, melted, and condensed. In the end, its volume was compressed by 10 times, and it turned into 10 yellow-skinned, muscular men that were 10 feet tall. They were the yellow, turbaned strongmen. "Greetings, Master." The voices of the 10 yellow turbaned strongmen were very loud, and they looked like real people. Luo Fan glanced at the 10 yellow turbaned strongmen and knew that his refinement was very successful. They all had 9 layers of restrictions in their bodies, and they had more complete intelligence so that they could do more complicated things. He couldn't help but be very satisfied. After giving some instructions, the yellow-turbaned strongmen obeyed his orders and dispersed. Some cleaned, and some tidied up. They seemed to be very busy. At that moment, Hongjun and the others were attracted by everything in front of them. Whether it was the appearance of the cave abode or the appearance of the yellow-turbaned strongmen, they were already beyond their imagination. This kind of mysterious method, which was like the creation of things, made them even more determined to pursue Tao, to get closer to Luo Fan. Chapter 78. Luo Fan's mind moved slightly, and a mantra flowed through his mind. In an instant, 2 rays of golden light shot out from his eyes and enveloped Hongjun. This was the magic that he used the most, the one that could illuminate the origin. As the golden light enveloped him, he could see the specific state of Hongjun's body. At that moment, the energy in Hongjun's body had already undergone a mysterious change. Incomplete, gray, 3-dimensional talismans filled his meridians. There were 12,960 of these 3-dimensional talismans, and each of them was made up of 200 jade slips. They were rolled up into a scroll, just like a jade archive. Each of the jade slips seemed to be flashing with countless words and pictures, and the complexity and profoundness of it were difficult to describe with words. These 12,960 3-dimensional talismans were all very small, and the energy that formed the lines was very condensed, almost like spider silk. They condensed and took shape, and each of them continuously circulated in his meridians according to the circulation route of the art of supporting heaven and earth. Even at that moment, when he wasn't fully focused on cultivating, there were still threads of chaotic vitality seeping into his body, and they were constantly being twisted and integrated into his body. At first glance, it already had some form of magical power. However, it didn't have the ability to condense into a fruit of Tao, so it could only circulate in his meridians and not condense in his dantian. Luo Fan looked at it, and he couldn't help but feel very satisfied. The Jade Archive of Creation technique was indeed the most suitable cultivation method for Hongjun. In these few years, he had actually cultivated the second stage of the Jade Archive of Creation technique to the Great Perfection stage. At that moment, the energy in his body had already become an existence that was close to mana. Compared to real mana, its power was hundreds of times weaker, but compared to the original energy in his body, it was many times stronger. According to Luo Fan's concerns, if he could fully unleash the power of this energy and use the same cultivation method, the power would be at least 10 times stronger. Luo Fan thought for a while, and with a thought, countless complicated words and pictures swam in his mind, rotated, and condensed. In the blink of an eye, they condensed into a spiritual light. As soon as the spiritual light appeared, it rushed into the mud ball between Hongjun's eyebrows along Luo Fan's finger. Hongjun had already experienced it several times. He naturally knew that this was a technique bestowed by his master. He couldn't help but look excited. In his opinion, all the cultivation techniques and techniques that Luo Fan passed down to him were extremely powerful, possessed boundless might, and possessed boundless miraculous effects. Now that he saw Luo Fan imparting the technique again, he knew that he could learn an extremely mysterious technique. The distance between him and the great Tao was narrowing again. How could he not be excited? The spiritual light rushed into Hongjun's mind through a mysterious mechanism and suddenly exploded, turning into countless complicated and mysterious words and patterns. They instantly rushed into his soul and completely integrated into his memory. Hongjun instantly understood countless mysterious methods. These methods were all about how to use the energy in the body that was similar to magic power. After understanding this, Hongjun understood how great this was for him. He knew that his strength was at least twice as strong as before. At the same time, he felt that he seemed to have faintly understood some mysterious secrets. It seemed that something was constantly emerging from the depths of his heart, as if it was going to completely integrate with his soul, pushing his cultivation realm to another level. This is the enlightenment I had when I was traveling in the untainted land. It turns out that I haven't absorbed all the enlightenment. Hongjun instantly understood. After this enlightenment appeared, he instantly felt endless gratitude towards Luo Fan. At the same time, he sighed in his heart. It's so good to have a master. Thank you, master, for imparting the technique. After sighing, Hong Jun bowed gratefully. You can go to the side to absorb and comprehend. Luo Fan waved his hand, and a yellow-turbaned strongman came forward to lead Hong Jun to a wide stone room to cultivate. Hong Jun did not dare to be negligent. He also knew that this was the best for him. After thanking him, he left with the yellow-turbaned strongman. You too. Luo Fan turned his head to look at Ao Lai and Ao Een, who were looking at him eagerly, and pondered for a moment. The original form of Ao Lai and Ao Een was a pair of yin and yang black and white flood dragons. It had only been 10 years since they successfully cultivated the golden flood dragon transformation method. Logically speaking, the two of them should not have completely understood this cultivation method. It was indeed not suitable for Luo Fan to teach them this cultivation method. However, seeing that the two of them had been tortured by Luo Fu for the past 10 years, if they did not show any gratitude, it would be a bit unreasonable. Master, please be merciful. Ao Lai and Ao Een naturally understood the situation and quickly bowed. Luo Fan could not show his gratitude. He nodded and said, "You two come out with me to practice the cultivation method." "Thank you, Master." How could the two not understand that Luo Fan intended to teach them? They were naturally overjoyed. The three of them left the cave residence. Ao Lai and Ao Een did not look at each other. Their tacit understanding was almost telepathic, and they could sense each other's thoughts just by sensing their aura. After a pause, the two of them directly soared into the sky. They rushed out of the cave residence, and their figures suddenly expanded, turning into two black and white divine dragons that were tens of thousands of feet long. They were awe-inspiring, as if they had an instinctive pressure on all life. Although their aura was countless times weaker than the aura emitted by Buzhou Mountain, it also had another kind of profoundness. It was not suppressed by the vast and unyielding vastness of Buzhou Mountain. The two divine dragons raised their heads to the sky and let out a long roar. Their voices shook the heaven and earth, stirring up the rich, chaotic energy in the surroundings. Then, they coiled around each other, chasing each other, gradually twisting into a very mysterious and unpredictable shape, like a complicated three-dimensional talisman. Suddenly, the dragon roar exploded, and endless golden light instantly burst out from the three-dimensional talisman formed by the two divine dragons. After the golden light faded, the two divine dragons had turned into a pair of scissors that were 10 feet long. Its structure was simple and profound, black and white, and it looked very simple and unadorned. The chaotic yuan qi fluctuated slightly, and when it brushed past the blade of the scissors, it was as if it was cut in half. Anyone could see how sharp the scissors were at first glance. Luo Fan raised his hand, and the pair of scissors gradually shrank until it was 10 feet long, falling into his hand. It was cold and heavy, and it exuded an obscure, murderous aura. With a thought, golden light shone from his eyes, and in the blink of an eye, it illuminated the source of the pair of scissors. It only took 10 years to cultivate 18 layers of restrictions. It seems that any innate god's aptitude is quite terrifying. Countless talismans and restrictions flashed in his eyes, and he already understood all of this. This pair of scissors was naturally a celestial tool that Ao Lai and Ao Een had transformed after cultivating the Golden Jiao Dragon transformation technique. Golden Jiao Scissors. The Golden Jiao Dragon transformation technique was an incomparably mysterious magic art for dual cultivation. After cultivating it, not only could a Jiao transform into a dragon, but it could also fuse two Jiao dragons into an extremely mysterious celestial tool. At the peak of the initial stage, the Golden Jiao Scissors had a total of 81 layers of restrictions. After the 81 layers of restrictions were completed, if the fated opportunity was right, it could be transformed into a celestial tool. Its power would be increased by 100 times from the 81 layers of restrictions. After it was transformed into a celestial tool, the two's spiritual consciousness would completely fuse when it was transformed into a celestial tool. At that time, their realm, cultivation, and strength would all increase by a level. Chapter 79. At this time, the Golden Jiao Scissors had 18 enchantments. Compared to the 81 enchantments at its peak, it was almost not worth mentioning. However, because it was transformed from the Yin-Yang Dragon God, it was born with various magical powers. Naturally, it was not comparable to ordinary magic weapons. Just these 18 enchantments were enough to match the 36 enchantments of the Yellow Turban Hercules Emperor. Moreover, because it completely focused all its power on the attack, its attack power and destructive power were 10 times, or even 100 times more than the Yellow Turban Hercules Emperor. Luo Fan thought about it carefully. Countless inspirations flashed in his mind. In the blink of an eye, he already knew the limit of the Golden Jiao Scissors. With a move of his mind, he raised his hand, and the Golden Jiao Scissors turned into a black and white light that flew up. With a turn, it became tens of thousands of meters long. It suddenly opened up, facing the astral wind, lightning, and fire layer thousands of miles away. It was an extremely condensed cloud-shaped life that was like a 1,000 meters long spirit snake. Chia's soft sound was heard, followed by an extremely strange and mournful scream. The 1,000-foot-long spirit serpent, in the form of a cloud-shaped life form, was vivid and lifelike. Its scales were like that of a giant spirit serpent. It had been swimming there before, as if it was spying on Mount Buzhou, and also as if it was afraid of Mount Buzhou. Suddenly, a disaster fell from the sky. After the Golden Jiao Scissors, its body was still intact, but it was tongue-tied. A loud sound rolled out from its mouth. Then its body shook, and it exploded from head to tail in an instant. Its size suddenly expanded by tens of thousands of times, turning into a golden and green cloud. The Golden Jiao Scissors sucked, and the cloud was sucked between the two scissors, compressed into a solid sphere of 100 meters in size. Luo Fan raised his hand and waved. The Golden Flood Dragon Scissors carried the 100-zhang large solid sphere and rushed forward, crossing tens of thousands of miles to arrive in front of him. With another turn, it returned to the size of a 100-zhang large sphere and floated quietly in the air. Luo Fan raised his hand, and the chaotic energy in the void spontaneously condensed into countless complicated talismans. In an instant, they were imprinted on the golden and green solid sphere that was 10 feet in size. The thousands of meters long spirit snake was on the 9th layer of the astral wind, lightning, and fire layer. Since it dared to approach Buzhou Mountain, its strength was naturally quite powerful. Its essence was composed of pure Western Gungjin divine wind and Imu true source heavenly fire. These two energies had gone through a period of transformation, and they already had a mysterious vitality. They had countless powers, and they were being used by Luo Fan. As the 3D runes formed from the primal chaos energy were imprinted into it, the solid sphere suddenly melted and turned into a liquid that slowly submerged the entire body of the Golden Dragon Scissors. The liquid gradually seeped into the scissors and completely soaked it. The energy that seeped into the Golden Flood Dragon Scissors was like flowing water under the effect of the talismans. It washed every restriction of the Golden Flood Dragon Scissors and the intrinsic materials that made up the Golden Flood Dragon Scissors. This energy was constantly consumed, and when the Golden Jiao Scissors was completely washed, it was also completely consumed. After being washed by this energy, the Golden Jiao Scissors became even more agile. The coldness and murderous aura became even stronger, and the flow of energy inside it became smoother. Looking at its power, it had more than doubled in strength. Seeing this, Luo Fan was very satisfied. What he did just now was to use the mysterious vitality of the cloud-shaped life form to wash the Golden Jiao Scissors and purify its essence. After this essence practice, the Golden Flood Dragon Scissors would be much easier to improve, and every step forward would also increase the range of improvement. He waved his hand, and the Golden Jiao Scissors suddenly stopped. A bit of light rushed out from his finger and entered the Golden Jiao Scissors. It exploded at the bottom core of the 18 layers of restrictions, turning into countless complicated words and patterns. After obtaining these words and patterns, the golden Jiao scissors trembled slightly, and a wordless joy spread from it. This was a scissors technique, a wonderful martial art that Luo Fan had specially created for the golden Jiao scissors. With this scissors technique, the power of the golden Jiao scissors would increase by more than 100 times. At this point, the power of this magic weapon could no longer be compared to any other magic weapon. Roar! A dragon's roar came from the golden Jiao scissors, and an incomparably joyful and confident aura surged from it. Then, the golden flood dragon scissors suddenly swayed and turned into scissor shadows that filled the sky. They covered the area of 1,000 miles in front of Luo Fan, covering every space within 1,000 miles. Endless murderous aura appeared out of thin air, filling every corner of this space. All the chaotic yuan qi in this space seemed to be suddenly stirred, and it was instantly twisted into something that couldn't be absorbed or used. It was an existence filled with endless murderous aura, and it surged within 1,000 miles. In this sky full of scissors, every scissor was solid, and the way each scissor moved was different from the other scissors. However, it contained an indescribable mystery, as if it was in accordance with some profound principle. It made one's mind involuntarily be attracted by it, as if one could comprehend some kind of principle that would benefit them for the rest of their lives. The golden Jiao scissors constantly changed, and the scissors in the sky also constantly changed. Suddenly, they merged into 36 scissors, forming a profound formation that turned the chaotic yuan qi that had been twisted into an incomparably sharp, murderous aura. Suddenly, it turned into 3 scissors, forming a void that devoured all the murderous aura, turning everything within 1,000 miles into an absolute void without any yuan qi, air, or matter. Suddenly, it turned into a single scissor that tore through space, causing it to distort slightly. There were a total of 18 profound martial arts, which pushed the power of the golden Jiao scissors to a level that even Ao Lai and Ao Yin could not imagine. Although the two of them had turned into the golden Jiao scissors and their own spiritual senses were hidden, their self-consciousness was still paying attention to everything about the golden Jiao scissors through some mysterious mechanism. Controlling the golden Jiao scissors, they could naturally know everything that Luo Fan had done. At this moment, both of them simultaneously felt endless gratitude and joy in the depths of their hearts. They were grateful that Luo Fan had subdued them, and they were glad that they had been wise enough to give in. After a long time, they finally finished practicing the 18 profound martial arts. Satisfied, they put away the golden Jiao scissors and turned it back into the Dragon Man and Dragon Woman. They landed in front of Luo Fan, bowed, and said gratefully, "Thank you, Master, for the technique." Luo Fan was also quite satisfied with the power of the martial arts he had created. He nodded and said, "This technique is called Yin-Yang Formless 18 Void-Piercing Scissors, and its power is quite impressive. If you can comprehend it thoroughly, it can be upgraded to 81 scissors. The two of you need to put in the effort to figure it out. Don't waste the potential of this martial art." "I won't dare to be negligent." Ao Lai and Ao Yin bowed again. At this time, they were already completely convinced, and they felt an unprecedented sense of belonging to Luo Fan's sect. Luo Fan looked at their performance and was secretly delighted. He waved his hand, and an invisible force lifted them up. "Fun! Ha! Fun! Ha! I want scissors! I want scissors!" At this time, Luo Fu, who was wrapped in a gray cloud and holding Luo Fan's body, suddenly giggled. I want to go crazy again." Chapter 80. Hearing this, Luo Fan frowned and lightly shouted, "Don't be rude." He naturally knew how humiliating it was for Ao Lai and Ao Yin to transform into the golden flood dragon scissors for Luo Fu to play with. It was the same as giving their bodies to others to play with. Since he had already given face to the two dragons at the beginning, he naturally had to go through with it. He couldn't let it go to waste at the last moment. When had Luo Fu ever been scolded by Luo Fan in such a heavy tone? Although he didn't know what Luo Fan meant, he was only stunned for a moment before he pouted and began to cry. His voice was clear and loud, but it made Luo Fan frown. Seeing Luo Fu crying, Aolai hurriedly stepped forward and said, "Master, don't blame the young master. We are the guardian beasts of the mountain and should make the young master happy." Transforming into the golden flood dragon scissors for the young master to play with is not a big deal. As he said that, he exchanged glances with Ao-in. The two of them turned into black and white streams of air and suddenly intertwined with each other. Then they condensed again and formed a pair of scissors that was 10 feet long. As it spun, it gradually shrank until it became very cute. It no longer looked ferocious, but instead looked very cute. It floated in front of Luo Fu like a palm. Seeing the scissors appear, Luo Fu sniffled and reached out to grab the scissors. His expression became slightly better. Seeing this, Luo Fan couldn't help but smile bitterly. Fortunately, Luo Fu had a baby's heart. After holding the golden flood dragon scissors, it didn't take long for him to put this unhappiness to the back of his mind. He completely returned to normal and became very dependent on Luo Fan. Luo Fan felt helpless. However, he couldn't get angry at the baby-like Luo Fu. He could only rub his head and sigh before letting out a sigh. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, Luo Fan had already lived in the abode at the top of Buzhou Mountain for an entire Yuan Wei, a total of 129,600 years. Every time he thought about how long he had been in the primordial world, Luo Fan felt an uncontrollable sense of unreality. On Earth, according to his understanding, it had only taken humans less than 10,000 years to go from the stage of eating raw meat and drinking blood to conquering space. More than 120,000 years, which was 12 times longer than this period of time. If Earth had such a long time to develop, perhaps the Milky Way galaxy would have been conquered. On this particular day, Luo Fan sat cross-legged at a point where the primordial energy gathered in the cave abode. He closed his eyes and cultivated. The primordial energy in the surroundings, which seemed to be solid, filled the entire cave abode. The primordial energy was almost solid at any time, but it flowed very quickly. It crazily poured into Luo Fan's body, and then it was constantly twisted and scattered by him. Finally, it was completely absorbed by the three-dimensional talisman in the shape of Buzhou Mountain. Luo Fan's will was in a trance state, as if it had merged with some kind of existence that contained endless mysteries. They constantly exchanged some kind of information with each other, and constantly sought some things that were beneficial to him, but could not be described with words. Suddenly, an indescribable sense of fulfillment pushed Luo Fan's mind to a height that was incomparable to before. In the blink of an eye, he comprehended a mystery that he could not comprehend before. In an instant, the secret of heaven and earth seemed to be one step closer to him. At this moment, Luo Fan had a kind of understanding that he had broken through. There were 3 levels of the Earth Immortal's Tao fruit: itinerant immortal, perfected immortal, and golden immortal. Although there were 3 levels in the same realm, the difference between them was almost incalculable. For cultivator of the next realm, the cultivator of the previous realm was like an ant, an existence that could be easily squashed. Luo Fan spent a long time to absorb the primordial energy in the primordial energy to enrich his magic power, to comprehend the great Tao in the dark, to improve his cultivation and realm. Finally, on this one day, he achieved the breakthrough that he had dreamed of. A misty, grayish-brown light suddenly emerged from Luo Fan's lower dantian, gradually expanded, and slowly wrapped around his entire body. The light rushed out and filled every corner of the cave abode. The primordial energy in the cave abode, which was so thick that it was almost solid, was crushed bit by bit under the impact of the light. It was twisted and scattered, and finally turned into an extremely pure energy. It was pulled straight into his body, and was then swallowed by his lower dantian, which in turn strengthened the misty, grayish-brown light. The light grew larger and larger, and gradually, the entire cave abode turned into a misty, grayish-brown world. It was illusory and mysterious, containing endless mysteries and endless mysteries. The light seemed to be as pure as one, without any impurities. It also seemed to contain everything, including everything in the world. It seemed to change in an instant, but it also seemed to be eternally motionless. It was mysterious and indescribably wonderful. In the blink of an eye, another 3 days and 3 nights passed. Suddenly, an indescribably terrifying suction was produced from the depths of the cave mansion. This mysterious and indescribable light crazily rolled back under the effect of this terrifying suction, and in the blink of an eye, rushed into Luo Fan's body. The entire cave abode became clear again, and the rich primordial energy that had been filling the cave abode for the past Yuan Hui was swept away, completely disappearing without a trace. Luo Fan's figure was as usual. He appeared on the cattail hassock in the depths of the cave abode. His expression was solemn and calm, and a very mysterious aura exuded from his body. It was filled with an unyielding and persistent aura, which intertwined with the aura that Buzhou Mountain emitted at all times. It seemed to be exactly the same, merging into one, and also seemed to be completely different. It was mysterious beyond measure. Suddenly, Luo Fan opened his eyes, and 2 incomparably deep universes were contained in his eyes. It was all-encompassing, and those with keen senses could even see endless mountains and rivers and endless stars. The path of cultivation is so long, and I really am still far from it. Luo Fan did not have any complacency, only a kind of determination and persistence that came from finding a distant goal. At this time, all the supernatural power in Luo Fan's body had been recondensed in the dantian in his lower abdomen, forming an earthly immortal fruit of the way that contained infinite mystery and power, an earthly immortal fruit of the true immortal level. This fruit of the way had undergone a great change compared to a Yuan Hui. A Yuan Hui ago, this fruit of the way had condensed in the dantian, although it was mysterious beyond measure. And although it contained infinite mystery, it still seemed a little illusory, and one could tell at a glance that it was condensed from energy. Moreover, more importantly, there was an obvious sense of emptiness and desire. However, the situation this time was different. This earthly, immortal fruit of the way that had grown by size was alive, and it was like a fruit that existed in reality. It was grayish-brown and mysterious, and it pulsed slightly, constantly expanding and contracting like a beating heart. An indescribable aura exuded from it, and it seemed that every pulsation contained infinite mysteries of heaven and earth, as well as infinite truths. The origin of life contained in it had grown to a very shocking level, and it resonated with the spirit that had also undergone a great change. They were connected to each other, forming a very mysterious system. At the same time, the 259,200 three-dimensional talismans that formed the earthly immortal fruit of the way had long been filled, and the originally empty space inside the talismans had long been filled with infinite special energy. It exuded an indescribable sense of fullness and satisfaction. Chapter 81. Luo Fan's Sea of Consciousness had also undergone dramatic changes during this Yuan Hui's cultivation. Just its surface area alone had expanded by 10 times, from 49,000 miles wide to 49,000 miles wide. At the same time, its height had also increased by 10 times, from 49,000 miles to 49,000 miles tall. At first glance, the width and height of the entire Sea of Consciousness were no different from the untainted world in the outside world. In this vast Sea of Consciousness, Yi Shiwen's divine soul was growing tenfold. The Buzhou Mountain, which was transformed by his divine soul, had grown tenfold in the process. The foot of the mountain stepped on the ground, followed the veins of the earth, and firmly grasped the earth. Above its head was the sky, holding up the gray matter in the sky that was like a canopy. His will cut into the divine soul, and he only felt that there was an extremely powerful pressure constantly pressing down on him from the foot of the mountain. This pressure made him feel an indescribable sense of responsibility and mission, which made him never feel confused at all. Compared with before Yuan Wei, this Buzhou mountain had become more concrete and detailed. It seemed that even every tiny stone on it was exactly the same as the Buzhou mountain in the outside world, except that it was slightly smaller. These changes made this Buzhou mountain seem more mysterious and real. Looking at the entire sea of consciousness through the perspective of the divine soul, he was almost intoxicated by the feeling that the world was in his hands. He was in a state where his feet were on the ground and his head was in the sky. The ground beneath him seemed to be giving him endless strength, and the gray sky above his head seemed to be giving him infinite stability. The sea of consciousness was filled with wisps of aura containing infinite mystery, as if even the air contained infinite mystery. The ground was undulating, and all kinds of terrain that Luo Fan was very familiar with, but also very strange, filled the whole land. What a vast and boundless world! The grayish-brown divine soul was more condensed and more stable than before Yuan Wei, as if it had been washed over by time and had undergone some mysterious changes. With a thought in his mind, the incantation of the nameless cultivation method appeared in his mind, and the earthly immortal's Tao fruit in his dantian exploded with a bang in the blink of an eye, transforming into a grayish-brown airflow that seemed as thin as a thread but was perfect and full of infinite mystery, and it flowed along his meridians. This was precisely the magic power that had already discovered a qualitative change. This magical power circulated in his meridians in a mysterious path. When it flowed through his Niwen palace, it rushed straight into his sea of consciousness through some mysterious mechanism. Inside, it turned into a 1,000-zhang-wide river composed of countless huge three-dimensional talismans, which flowed around the sea of consciousness world, forming a huge, extremely mysterious three-dimensional talisman that covered the entire sea of consciousness world, almost flowing through every inch of the sea of consciousness world. During this process, the great river rushed into the Buzhou mountain formed by his soul a total of 81 times before it rushed into a mysterious location and left this profound world of the sea of consciousness, returning to the meridians in his body. This entire process was vastly different from what it had been a Yuan Hui before. It seemed even more mysterious and incredible. Every time this magical power passed through the divine soul, it underwent a slight change. Every three-dimensional talisman that constituted the magical power changed slightly, becoming more complicated and more compatible with the changed divine soul. It appeared to be more detailed and more mysterious. After this magical power returned to the meridians, it continued to flow according to the mysterious path of the nameless cultivation method for a total of 9 cycles before it returned to the dantian in his lower abdomen, condensing into an earthly immortal's Tao fruit that contained infinite mystery. When a magical power had completely condensed, Luo Fan opened his eyes again. The world in his eyes did not undergo an earth-shaking change like in the legends, but everything in his eyes seemed to have something extra. It was as if he could already see with his naked eyes some of the mysteries that he had to use the divine illumination technique to see before. Suddenly, with a thought, Luo Fan made a divination with his fingers and couldn't help but smile bitterly. After a period of time, Luo Fan's chief son, Luo Fu, had already grown up to be around 12 years old. His skin was as fair as jade, and he looked like a golden boy. He was extremely adorable, and anyone who saw him would involuntarily fall in love with him. But this was only the surface. If you were deceived by the surface, then you would lose. Luo Fu's personality was extremely mischievous. After a Yuan Hui, as he grew up, his curiosity became more exuberant. He was even more interested in the Buzhou mountain where he was. Whether it was a mountain, a rock, a grass, a tree, no matter where it was, he wanted to explore it all. Since tens of thousands of years ago, when he learned to play like a 3-year-old child, the Buzhou mountain became chaotic, and almost every inch of the mountain was left with his footprints. Luo Fan hardened his Tao heart, and after being tormented for 3,000 years, he finally could not take it anymore. So he threw him to Ao Lai and Ao Een in the name of cultivating in seclusion. Only then did he have time to continue cultivating. At this time, he had just completed his Tao, and with the Yin and Yang calculation method, he knew that he had spent 1,800 years in seclusion. During this time, Luo Fu had actually brought Ao Lai and Ao Een, who had transformed into the golden dragon scissors, to the god of Buzhou Mountain at this moment at the foot of the Buzhou Mountain, where the god of Buzhou Mountain was. A cute 12-year-old child, who was holding a pair of chibi scissors and dressed in a red and green child outfit, was knocking on the huge rock where mountain god Buzhou was. Boom, 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 sounds kept coming from the huge rock. "Is anyone there?" the child asked in an I voice. His voice was crisp and cute, and it could definitely arouse anyone's love. However, his hands were very heavy, and the booming sounds made the rock shake and the ground undulated. It seemed like even the ground was shaken. Who was making noise? A distant and desolate voice came from the rock. Uncle Ao and Aunt Ao really didn't lie to me. There really is someone in here. The child's eyes lit up, and he muttered. This child was naturally Luo Fu. The reason why he came here, to torment the god of Buzhou Mountain, was obvious from his words. It must be that Ao Lai and Ao Een couldn't stand Luo Fu's torment, so they betrayed the god of Buzhou Mountain to shift the blame to him. Luo Fu was not an innate god, and his aptitude was fundamentally different from an innate god's. Although Luo Fan had given him a lot of special attention and carefully taught him all kinds of spells and techniques, Luo Fu had only tempered his corporeal body to a very strong state. His use of energy was only at the level of barely using chaotic vitality. Compared to Hong Jun, when he first met Luo Fan, he was still a few times worse. Compared with the god of Buzhou Mountain, who had cultivated the great way of deity and the method of deity detachment, Luo Fu was like an ant. He could kill Luo Fu with just a thought. However, although Luo Fu was weak, there was a trace of Luo Fan's aura in him. It was this trace of aura that let Ao Lai and Ao Een know that the god of Buzhou Mountain would never hurt Luo Fu, so they dared to tell Luo Fu that there was a fun person here. Chapter 82. Uncle Mountain God, I'm so bored now. Come and play with me, okay? Luo Fu used his great strength to knock on the big stone and said directly, "Which family's child is making noise here? Leave quickly. I'm busy. How can I have time to play with a child like you?" The distant and desolate voice seemed to come from every inch of the whole big stone, which seemed particularly majestic and grand. Hee, Uncle Mountain God, don't be like this. Always practicing won't be very effective. You need to rest more. Come and play with me, Luo Fu said with his particularly cute smile. With that, he didn't wait for the answer of Buzhou Mountain God. He raised his hand, and a white light rose to the sky from behind him. It was constantly twisting and changing in the air. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a huge snow-white tiger, floating above Luo Fu's head. The light was bright, elegant, and full of an invisible majesty. It stepped on the void, raised its head, and stood there like a living thing. It let out a long roar to the sky, and the sound shook the world. Luo Fu stood there, raised his hand, and waved gently. The huge white tiger suddenly pounced on the big stone. The surrounding innate primordial chi was agitated and produced a violent explosion. Wave after wave of shock waves rushed out in all directions from this position. The white tiger's claws and teeth were awe-inspiring, emitting a strong murderous aura that shocked the world. This white tiger was a celestial device that Luo Fan had specially refined for Luo Fu in this Yuanhui. It consumed 81 kinds of rare treasures of heaven and earth in the future. It also contained 36 restrictions. It was only one step away from achieving spiritual awareness, and then it could become a magic weapon with infinite power. Its power was really amazing. Compared with the yellow turban Hercules Emperor that Luo Fan gave to Hong Jun, it had a super strong attack and defense ability. If Luo Fu used this Dharma artifact to fight, he would be able to fight against Hong Jun before the first Yuan Hui and not be at a disadvantage. Such an amazing power item would have been enough to set off a bloodbath in the cultivation world in the future. But in Luo Fu's hands, it was just one of the more fun toys among his 18. When the white tiger was 100 feet away from the rock suddenly emitted a myriad of misty green lights, which formed a thick light shield that completely enveloped the huge rock. They formed layers of light screens that blocked the white tiger. The white tiger was tens of thousands of feet in size, but in front of this relatively thin light barrier, it was as if it had encountered an impenetrable wall. It only caused the countless specks of light to tremble a few times before completely calming down, unable to cause any more damage. How dare you be so unreasonable? The god of Buzhou Mountain let out a furious roar. An awe-inspiring divine might soared into the sky. Following this roar, countless three-dimensional talismans were suddenly produced in the billions of specks of light. After these three-dimensional talismans appeared, they spun and circled wildly. As they spun and circled, the surrounding Buzhou Mountain suddenly trembled in a very strange manner. Following this tremor, an invisible force was produced out of thin air, instantly freezing the white tiger in midair. After it was frozen, the billions of specks of light that were resisting the white tiger instantly changed shape. They suddenly rushed out, left the rock, and suddenly expanded. In the blink of an eye, they had enveloped the entire white tiger that was tens of thousands of feet in size. Fun! Fun! Even though his celestial device had been frozen, Luo Fu was not afraid at all. Instead, he chuckled, as if it was very fun. Who is so ridiculous as to hand such a dangerous celestial device to a child who knows nothing about the world? I might have to teach you a lesson today. After the god of Buzhou Mountain had frozen the white tiger, he was also amazed by the white tiger's power. He spat out these words from the rock. Next, the countless three-dimensional talismans in the billions of specks of light began to spin rapidly, producing an even more dazzling light. As the light shrouded the white tiger, the light shield formed by the billions of specks of light kept compressing. The white tiger that was enveloped by the billions of specks of light roared and struggled madly during this process, as if it was enduring endless pain. However, no matter how it roared and struggled, it could not stop the light from compressing. Within a breath's time, the light shield that was tens of thousands of feet in size had been compressed into a light ball that was 100 feet in size. Inside the light ball, the white tiger that was tens of thousands of feet in size had collapsed, turning into a nimble and condensed white light. Within the white light, there were countless three-dimensional talismans that formed a system that kept spinning and changing. Over the past period of time, the god of Buzhou Mountain had made great progress. The cultivation of the Great Way of Heavenly God and the Great Way of Heavenly God had already entered the right track. The Great Way of Heavenly God had already condensed his spiritual consciousness, and he was gradually developing the power of Mountain God Buzhou. At this moment, the god of Buzhou Mountain had absolute control over the Buzhou Mountain within a radius of 10,000 miles around him. Although this control was not as good as the control of the top of Buzhou Mountain with the talisman crafted by Luo Fan, it was more flexible. Although its power was not as great, it was easier and more agile. Just now, he had used the power of the Buzhou Mountain within a radius of 10,000 miles to freeze the celestial device. This power was formless and intangible, and it was not a power like the chaotic vital energy or innate vital energy. Instead, it was a mysterious power that represented the essence of Buzhou Mountain. Or one could call this power the divine power. The white light within the ball of light was the true form of the magic tool, and the countless three-dimensional talismans that were flashing were the 36 layers of extremely profound restrictions. All of a sudden, the god of Buzhou Mountain sensed the aura of the celestial device and exclaimed, "Why is this aura so familiar? Is it the aura of my benefactor? Uncle Mountain God, I still have many tricks up my sleeve. Let's do it again." Luo Fu clapped his hands and shouted. As he spoke, he took out 17 balls of colorful light out of nowhere. The aura of these lights was not weaker than that of the white light that had transformed into a white tiger. Obviously, each of them represented a celestial device that was not weaker than that white light. The style of these talismans and the structure of this celestial device are of the same style as the Great Way of Heavenly God and the Great Way of Heavenly God. I can't be wrong. They must have been made by my benefactor who taught me Taoism. This kid must have a close relationship with my benefactor. The god of Buzhou Mountain was shocked as he observed the three-dimensional talismans on the white lights. Knowing that the kid in front of him must have a close relationship with his benefactor, the god of Buzhou Mountain did not dare to maintain his previous plan. Stop, stop, stop. Little brother, let's have a chat first. We can talk about the fun later, okay? The voice was still leisurely, but one could hear a sense of helplessness in it. No, this is fun. I want to play more. Luo Fu shook his head firmly. As he spoke, he was about to release the 17 colorful lights in his hand. Stop! The god of Buzhou Mountain roared anxiously. He raised his hand and withdrew the billions of scattered lights that had enveloped the celestial device. The celestial device shook and turned back into a white tiger that was tens of thousands of meters long, hovering in the sky. Chapter 83. After the god of Buzhou Mountain let go of the celestial artifact, the billions of rays of light suddenly shrank and condensed. In the blink of an eye, a middle-aged man dressed in a green robe appeared on the rock, emanating an awe-inspiring aura. This middle-aged man had a dignified appearance. He was the incarnation of the god of Buzhou Mountain. Although the god of Buzhou Mountain had made great progress in the past Yuan Wei, he had not achieved a born Taoism aptitude. For him, who was essentially a mountain god, achieving a born Taoism aptitude meant achieving the great way of sky god. That was equivalent to the power of an earthly immortal, so it was not easy to achieve a breakthrough. Therefore, in order to communicate with others, he used his own power to create an incarnation. When Luo Fu saw the god of Buzhou Mountain suddenly let go of the rock and condensed into a human form, he was very displeased. However, he could not continue to attack with so many celestial artifacts. He could only pout and put away the 17 colorful rays of light, then put them into the Re-Moon in his chest. The Re-Moon in his chest was a technique that Luo Fan taught him to open up a void storage space. Uncle Mountain God, you're not fun at all. Luo Fu pouted and said. The white tiger also gradually shrank, and in the blink of an eye, it became the size of an ordinary tiger. It suddenly sank down and landed next to Luo Fu, rubbing against Luo Fu's body like a pet. My little ancestor, the god of Buzhou Mountain, felt aggrieved. If it were not for your close relationship with my benefactor, I would have taught you a lesson as an elder. How could the power of a sky god be insulted by others? Little brother, we'll talk about playing later. Now, can you tell me where your celestial artifacts came from? The god of Buzhou Mountain tried his best to look gentle and kind. My father gave them to me. You're so stupid, Uncle Mountain God. Looking at Luo Fu as if looking at a fool, the god of Buzhou Mountain was enraged. At the same time, he was pleasantly surprised by what Luo Fu had just said. He stared at Luo Fu with sparkling eyes as if he was looking at a primordial spirit treasure. Uncle, you're no fun. I'm going to find someone else to play with, Luo Fu said as he scratched the back of his head, feeling a little creeped out by the Buzhou Mountain god's gaze. As he spoke, he turned around to leave. Ah, wait, little brother. Since you're the son of my benefactor, why not play with you? Don't. You're playing with me because you want to please my father. It's not fun at all. I don't want it. Ah, the god of Buzhou Mountain God did not expect Luo Fu to have such sharp senses, even though he was just a child. He tried to please Luo Fu, partly because Luo Fu was Luo Fan's son, and partly because he was grateful to Luo Fan. But more importantly, he wanted to meet Luo Fan through Luo Fu and ask him about the many problems he had encountered in his cultivation during the past Yuan Wei period. Just as he was thinking about how to get rid of Luo Fu's wariness, Luo Fu had already mounted the white tiger's back. With a slap on the tiger's butt, The white tiger had already soared into the sky, transforming into a beam of white light. In an instant, it had left mountain god Buzhou's territory, the 10,000-mile radius. The white tiger was a magic tool that Luo Fan had specially refined for Luo Fu. Naturally, he took Luo Fu's safety into consideration first. Needless to say, its flying speed was extremely shocking. What a pity! I let go of such a great opportunity. Looking at the white tiger's super speed, the god of Buzhou mountain god's admiration for Luo Fan deepened. He heaved a long sigh. Thank you for not blaming my son for his absurdity. If you have time, you can come to my cave abode for a chat. At this moment, a light voice that was very familiar to the god of Buzhou mountain god suddenly rang in his ears. Hearing this voice, the god of Buzhou mountain god was overjoyed. He was so excited that his incarnation was slightly distorted, and he almost could not maintain his form. This was clearly the voice of his benefactor, who taught him Taoism. Benefactor, I'm not talented, but I'm willing to go to your cave abode to seek your help. The god of Buzhou mountain god was so excited that his voice was choked with emotion. How could he not know that the benefactor said to go to the cave abode for a chat was to give him pointers? In the seeking cave at the top of Buzhou mountain, Luo Fan's eyes were shining, and his mind reflected the things within 1,000 miles around the god of Buzhou mountain. This was what he saw through the secret connection between the spirit talisman and the god of Buzhou mountain god. After breaking through the individual immortal realm, Luo Fan's perception range on the top of Buzhou mountain was more than 1,000 miles. It was obvious that he had made great progress to be able to have such a range under the strong pressure, but it was still not enough for him to perceive the scene at the foot of Buzhou mountain. That brat always needs me to clean up his mess. Luo Fan sighed. He dispersed the images in his mind and turned his attention to Hongjun, who was cultivating in the 9th layer of the strong wind, thunder, and fire layer in the cave abode. At this moment, in the 9th layer of the astral wind, thunder, and fire layer 10,000 miles away from Buzhou mountain, Hongjun was sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed. There was a stream of green light, which was condensed and clean, as clear as water. It was like a green cloud that was 1 acre in size, which was supporting his body. An indescribable and mysterious aura was constantly being emitted from his body, and above his head there was a gray ball of light that was constantly changing, slowly spinning and pulsating. After Yuan Hui's cultivation, Hongjun had completely absorbed the enlightenment he had gained when he traveled the untainted land. At this moment, he had already gone through 8 tribulations, and was only 1 step away from attaining the fruit of way of earth immortal. The energy in his body was already very similar to magic power. The energy that filled his meridians had already condensed into 12,960 three-dimensional talismans in the shape of jade archives, constantly circulating in his meridians. Occasionally, when it flowed past his dantian, it would try to condense and transform into the fruit of way of earth immortal, but to no avail. Each of these 12,960 three-dimensional talismans in the shape of jade archives was made up of 43,200 jade slips. As long as he had 1 day to go through 9 tribulations, he could condense the energy and transform it into talismans. Finally, he could condense 12,9,600 jade slips and attain the fruit of way of earth immortal. However, although it seemed to be only 1 step away, it was like the difference between heaven and earth. The difficulty was no less than cultivating from the beginning to his current realm. Hongjun's cultivation base had already gone through 8 tribulations 40,000 years ago. In these 40,000 years, although he had been cultivating ceaselessly, his cultivation base had not improved an inch, and he could not trigger the 9th tribulations at all. As Hongjun's master, Luo Fan naturally had to be concerned. After some observation, he knew that this was due to Hongjun's lack of accumulation. If he wanted to improve, he needed to work hard and accumulate bit by bit. Hence, he guided Hongjun to come to the strong wind, lightning, and fire level to cultivate. With the help of the harsh environment of the strong wind, lightning, and fire level, he tempered his strength and his state of mind until today. Disperse. Hong Jun suddenly opened his eyes and roared. This voice was like thunder, exploding with a loud bang. Along with this explosion, there was a life that looked like a six-winged golden silkworm 100 miles away. It was 10,000 feet long, and its face was extremely ferocious. Its appearance was like that of a real living creature, and there was boundless murderous aura buried in it. From its 6 intelligent eyes, one could see that its spiritual consciousness was not ignorant, but rather, it was quite cunning. The 6-winged golden silkworm shattered with a loud bang along with Hong Jun's roar. It only had time to let out a shrill scream before it turned into a ball of golden cloud. Then, Hong Jun sucked it, and it instantly crossed a distance of 100 miles, charging straight into the gray, ever-changing ball of light above Hong Jun's head. After a long time, the gray ball of light suddenly spun and spat out an embroidered handkerchief. It turned into a light curtain that covered the sky, enveloping the world within a radius of 1,000 miles. The dozen strange life forms within the 1,000 miles suddenly exploded, turning into pure energy that was devoured. The 9-spirit cloud light handkerchief. This embroidered handkerchief was the 9-spirit cloud light handkerchief, and the gray ball of light floating above his head was the connate inextinguishable spirit light. Previously, Hong Jun had used the inextinguishable characteristic of the connate inextinguishable spirit light to refine the 9-spirit cloud light handkerchief. After being refined by the connate inextinguishable spirit light, although this magic weapon did not obtain the inextinguishable characteristic, it had become stronger and harder to break than before. Chapter 84. The 9-spirit cloud radiance handkerchief was the first magic artifact that Hong Jun had refined himself. It had been a full Yuan Hui since the beginning of the refinement. Hong Jun naturally had deeper feelings for such an artifact compared to other artifacts. Under such circumstances, while he was increasing his cultivation, he would naturally not forget to refine this artifact. After continuously refining the 9-spirit cloud radiance handkerchief for an entire Yuan Hui, he'd already refined 36 layers of restrictions from the 9-spirit cloud radiance handkerchief that only had 9 layers of restrictions in the beginning, causing it to possess 36 different abilities. At this point, it had reached the minimum requirement to become a magic tool. Next, it only needed to be nourished and refined for a long time to make this magic tool give birth to a treasure spirit and become a magic tool. However, it needed an extremely long time and extremely rare opportunity to achieve that. This primitive world had just been created. At this moment, yin and yang had just been judged, and there was endless primordial qi in the world. With the help of primordial qi, ordinary magic tools only needed to be slightly refined to become extremely powerful. And once it became a magic tool, its power would reach an unimaginable level. This could be guessed by looking at the Void Wuji Palace. But it was also because of this that it became more difficult for a magic tool to give birth to a treasure spirit and become a magic tool. It also needed a longer time. Just like its power, it was far from the magic tools that grew with the help of the postnatal qi of heaven and earth in the future. To be more specific, in the future, a magic tool might only need to be nurtured and refined for thousands of years. But at this time, it would take several Yuan Hui, or even dozens of Yuan Hui, before there was even a trace of a possibility. After being refined by the connate inextinguishable spiritual light, the 9 spirits cloud light handkerchief's toughness had increased by more than 10 times, and its defensive ability had also increased to an unimaginable level. Although it was not indestructible, it was not something that ordinary magic tools could break. Hong Jun raised his hand and grabbed. The 9 spirits cloud light handkerchief that covered an area of 1,000 miles suddenly shook and then quickly shrank. In a breath's time, it came to Hong Jun's side, turned into a long robe, and wrapped around his body. Master asked me to rely on this adverse environment to temper my strength and my state of mind in order to trigger the 9th heavenly tribulation. It has already been over 30,000 years now, so why am I still unable to trigger the 9th heavenly tribulation? What Master said must be correct. It seems that my method is wrong. Hong Jun speculated in his heart. After he overcame the eighth heavenly tribulation, Hong Jun's strength already possessed the bearing of someone who'd attained the earthly immortal Tao fruit, and every single move he made carried unfathomable might. When his mind shook, the phenomena of the heavens would change along with it, and there was no need for him to utilize his strength to stimulate it. With his strength, in the ninth layer of the astral wind, lightning, and fire layer, he only encountered danger several times in the first few hundred years due to his lack of familiarity with the use of quasi-spiritual power, the power that transformed into spiritual power in Hong Jun's body. He needed to rely on the innate, inextinguishable spiritual light to escape. Later on, it became easier and easier. Instead, he used the various lives in the astral wind, lightning, and fire layer as forging materials, increasing the power of the Yellow Turban Emperor and the Nine Spirits Cloud Light Handkerchief by several times. For tens of thousands of years, he had already eliminated the stronger, strange lives in the ninth layer of the astral wind, lightning, and fire layer within 1,000,000 miles around Buzhou Mountain. Only some weaker strange lives, such as the six-winged golden silkworm that was destroyed by his roar, still remained, adding a little vitality to the position within 1,000,000 miles. After thinking about it carefully and recalling the process of crossing from millions of miles to Buzhou Mountain, Hong Jun suddenly repented. It turns out to be this innate, inextinguishable spiritual light. It is because of the protection of this spiritual light that I can be unscrupulous and rely on it, causing my state of mind to not be tempered enough. After so many years of nourishment, this innate, inextinguishable spiritual light had already been imprinted with Hong Jun's mark. Although it couldn't be turned into an innate spiritual treasure, it could still be used a little. Its power was quite extraordinary. It was comparable to a very strong magic tool, even not inferior to a common magic tool. The ability of this innate, inextinguishable spiritual light to be used as a magic tool was discovered by Hong Jun because tens of thousands of years ago, when he encountered danger in the astral wind, lightning, and fire layer for the first time and thought that he was doomed, the innate, inextinguishable spiritual light automatically rushed out of his sea of consciousness and saved him. After that, Hong Jun knew that this innate, inextinguishable spiritual light actually had such a magical power in addition to the power that he discovered. Under the overjoyed experiment, he was extremely satisfied with its power. He felt that under its protection, there would be no danger, and unknowingly, he became dependent on it. Understanding the crux of the problem, Hong Jun's firm will to pursue Tao instantly suppressed this dependence. With a thought, the innate, inextinguishable spiritual light had already been kept into his sea of consciousness, hanging 3 feet above his soul. I came here not to refine a magic tool, but to temper my state of mind. Although you want to help me, your protection hinders my state of mind from improving, and it is harmful to me. May the spiritual light have a spirit and understand my intention. After Hong Jun's soul finished speaking, he got up and bowed 3 times to the innate, inextinguishable spiritual light above 3 feet. The innate, inextinguishable spiritual light trembled slightly, and it took a long time for it to return to a normal state. It seemed that it really had a spirit and understood the meaning of Hong Jun's words. Seeing this, Hong Jun sat under the inextinguishable spiritual light again and closed his eyes. His mind returned to his body, and with a thought, the dark green cloud under him carried his body and flew forward. This dark green cloud was the transformation of the yellow-turbaned strongman emperor. Its speed was enough to increase his speed by more than 10 times. Because it was already in a perfect state at the beginning, after a period of nourishment, the yellow-turbaned strongman emperor's restrictions did not improve at all, and it was still in a perfect state of 36 layers. However, because it had absorbed countless materials over the years, its power had also increased several times. After turning into the yellow-turbaned strongman emperor, the space at its heart had opened up to a radius of 100,000 feet, which was enough to accommodate a mountain in the primordial world. It wasn't just that, The vitality within his body was so dense that just a slight circulation of it would be sufficient to revive the dead and regrow flesh and bones. The might of flying and disappearing like this was only a small part of its might. Although its speed was extremely fast, it wasn't worth mentioning. Luo Fan, who was far away in the cave abode at the top of Buzhou Mountain, naturally saw the changes in Hong Jun's eyes. With his understanding of Hong Jun, he already knew the change of his mentality without using the mind-reading technique. In addition, the innate, inextinguishable spiritual light was taken back as evidence, and it was completely confirmed that Hong Jun had found the crux of the problem. He couldn't help but feel very satisfied. At the same time, he didn't relax his attention on Hong Jun. Hong Jun had already understood the problem, which meant that he planned to take a risk. Since he planned to take a risk, it meant that as his master, he had to pay attention to it, lest Hong Jun failed to take the risk and really died. Being able to turn around from the wrong mentality, I'm afraid he is only one step away from truly understanding the mystery of the ninth retribution. I wonder if he can comprehend the mystery within 3 years. Luo Fan was very interested. At this time, he was paying attention to Hong Jun through the obscure connection with the yellow-turbaned strongman emperor, so he didn't have to worry about Hong Jun flying too far away from him and getting out of his perception. Chapter 85. In the 9th level of the astral wind, thunder, and fire layer, the life forms formed by the astral wind, thunder, and fire already had enough intelligence and were not simple instincts. Their body structure was also sufficiently complex. When the life forms with the same structure gathered together, they gradually formed a very special ecological circle. In the direction that Hong Jun was heading, 1,000,000 miles away from Buzhou Mountain was the territory of a group of 9-headed snakes. Within 100,000 miles of this territory, the only creatures that could survive were the very strange 9-headed snakes. Apart from the 9-headed snakes, all the strange life forms within this area had been devoured and assimilated. Among them, there were territories and clans. Naturally, there were the strongest beings like the clan leader. The growth of this 9-headed snake was very strange. It was not growing from small to large, and the bigger it was, the stronger it was. Instead, it was growing from large to small, and the smaller it was, the stronger it was. Among them, the length of the clan leader was only 100 feet long. Its body was as black as ink, and it was covered in scales. Each of the 9 snake heads was different, and each of them had different magical powers. It was very powerful. Although it did not have a cultivation method, it could not attain the Earth Immortal Realm, but in terms of power, it was stronger than those who attained the Earth Immortal Realm. Even compared to the current Luo Fan, he was not the slightest bit inferior. Of course, it was only power. The difference in realm and cultivation allowed it to be easily crushed to death when it faced Luo Fan. However, when the difference in power reached a certain level, it was enough to suppress the difference in realm and cultivation. Although Hong Jun was only one step away from attaining the Earth Immortal Realm, and his realm and cultivation were much higher than that of the 9-headed snake clan leader, his power was far inferior to that of the 9-headed snake clan leader. Moreover, the difference had reached a point where the realm and cultivation could not make up for it. It could be said that Hong Jun was taking a great risk by stepping into the 9-headed snake's territory. At this moment, Hong Jun rode the yellow-turbaned Hercules Emperor and rushed into this area. What came in front of him was the 9-headed snake. These pitch-black 9-headed snakes were cruel and tyrannical, and they wouldn't show the slightest bit of courtesy to any living creature that invaded their territory. They continuously surged towards Hong Jun. They unleashed their greatest power and fully unleashed the abilities of the 9 heads. Looking at their performance, they would not stop until they destroyed Hong Jun. The 9-headed serpent was condensed from extremely pure Gui water, Yin lightning, and extremely cold Yin wind. Its nature was quite extraordinary, and it was also an extremely rare refining material. If it was collected, it would be impossible to refine a magic treasure, but a magic treasure that could withstand 20 to 30 layers of restrictions would not be a problem. The 9-headed serpent was a species, and there were many types of them. The reason why it could be distinguished was because of the difference in the content and distribution ratio of the Gui water een lightning and the coldest een wind. Thus, even though they were of the same race and species, the attacks they could unleash, the divine abilities they possessed, and the might they possessed were different. As a result, during the battle, the attacks that surged towards Hong Jun were all sorts of strange and varied. Hong Jun had already decided to use the harsh environment to temper his own strength and state of mind, so he didn't use any magic treasure, other than the 9-spirit cloud-light handkerchief to cover his body. Even the yellow-turbaned Hercules Emperor was kept back into his body after entering the territory of the 9-headed serpent. He only relied on the various spells and divine abilities taught by Luo Fan to kill the enemy. This slaughter caused the sky and earth to darken, and the moon to lose its light. The techniques and magical abilities taught by Luo Fan were magical and mysterious, and their power was astonishing. However, the number of 9-headed serpents was endless, and the further they went, the smaller they became, and the stronger they became. Thus, even if Hong Jun gradually perfected the various spells and divine abilities taught by Luo Fan, he still inevitably fell into a disadvantageous position. The range that he could move around was gradually reduced. At this time, among the 9-headed serpents that were dispatched, the strongest one was only 10,000 feet long. The strongest patriarch of the entire tribe didn't make a move at all. To be able to display this kind of power with the help of all kinds of secret arts, it's really rare. Luo Fan, who was far away in the cave residence at the top of Mount Buzhou, felt the changes here and thought to himself. Although the yellow-turbaned Hercules Emperor was kept into Hong Jun's body, with Luo Fan's cultivation, it was just a matter of thought to observe the situation outside through Hong Jun's body. There is no need to say more. This kind of water, een lightning, and extreme cold een wind is a good material for refining. It's a pity to waste it like this. Luo Fan looked at the 9-headed serpent that was scattered by Hong Jun and turned back into water, een lightning, and extreme cold een wind dissipating in the astral wind, thunder, and fire layer. He felt it was a pity. With a move of his mind, countless complicated words and patterns flashed in his mind, turning into a little aura. Through the mysterious connection with the yellow-turbaned Hercules Emperor, it rushed and drilled into Hong Jun's body. It exploded and turned into endless complicated words and patterns, merging into Hong Jun's memory. True martial spirit transforming technique. Master. Hong Jun was emitting a profound light to repel a 3 kilometers long 9-headed serpent when he suddenly noticed that a profound technique had suddenly appeared in his memories. With a thought, he understood exactly what was going on. An indescribable feeling of gratitude and excitement couldn't help but gush out from his heart. With a thought, the mantra of this true martial spirit transforming technique flowed in his mind. He grasped the void with both hands at the same time. His movements were gentle and smooth, but it seemed to contain some kind of indescribable truth. A strong suction force was generated between his hands. The water, een thunders, and the cold, een winds around him were torn apart by this suction force. With a sudden suction force, they gathered towards his hands, compressed and condensed into a 30 feet long, grayish-green serpent with a dragon head and a snake body. Its entire body was wrapped in strange clouds and mist. The tongued serpent. This was the superpower of the true martial spirit transforming skill. The soaring serpent that was condensed was not made of pure energy, but contained some kind of mysterious thought. It connected with Hong Jun's mind, and the two became one, and then one became two. It could be said that this tongued serpent was equivalent to an incarnation that Hong Jun could abandon at any time. Moreover, because its essence was water, een lightning, and extreme cold een wind, its essence was no different from that of the 9-headed serpent. It had the various magical powers of the 9-headed serpent and was extremely powerful. However, Hong Jun, who had condensed this tongued serpent, did not have the slightest pride. Instead, he looked very ashamed. This was because, according to the description of the cultivation method passed to him by Luo Fan, the tongued serpent condensed by the true martial spirit transforming technique even at its weakest, had to be thousands of feet long and 10 feet thick. If its power reached the peak of perfection, it had to be hundreds of miles long and nearly a mile thick. Compared to that, this 30 feet long tongue serpent was really nothing. To say that it was a decoration was already flattering it. How could this not make Hong Jun feel ashamed? The essence of the tongue serpent condensed by the true martial spirit transforming technique, and the nine-headed serpent were the same, but the standard of strength of the two was from large to small and from small to large. They were completely opposite. There was an endless amount of mysteries contained within. The answers to some of the questions in the book review are as follows. The 30,000-meter-long wall was only a few dozen meters long and several hundred meters wide, but it looked like a straight line. That wasn't a problem at all. It was just like the Great Wall. Didn't it look like a straight line from above? How could you say that it wasn't grand? Another example is an elephant or a whale. Aren't they just small dots when you look at them from a distance? Therefore, this kind of structure is not unreasonable. As for those who say that the updates of this book are slow, that is because I have troubles in real life. Recently, I really have no choice. Maybe it will get better after a period of time, but I'm sure that this book will not be incomplete. If you can't wait to read a little bit every day, you can add it to your collection and vote every day. This is very important, hee. After a period of time, maybe you will find that this book is rich enough. Well, if this book has a high recommendation, in order to achieve the best recommendation effect, I will naturally try my best to update faster. Usually, there is no need to do this. Everyone, please understand. As for the problem of the slow plot, I admit that the rhythm of this book is not very perfect. This will definitely be improved in the following content. However, the starting point of writing this book is that I have read too many primitive age novels and am a little tired of the same routine. Therefore, please do not use the routine of ordinary primitive age novels in this book. Next, the plot will be faster, but I think it should be different from what everyone has guessed. This is my little confidence. The main questions referring to what I have seen, there may be other more serious problems, but see below for the reasons, are answered as above. I will not answer the book review section. I have been so busy recently that I can only look at the book review section occasionally. If I answer questions one by one, I really don't have the time. Sorry. Finally, crazily asking for collections and recommendations. Without these, everything is like the moon in the water. This chapter is from September 16th. Today I have to go back to my hometown, so I should not have time to go online today. Sorry. Chapter 86. The moment the soaring serpent appeared, it exuded a superior aura that looked down on everything. Although the surrounding nine-headed serpents already had a relatively complete spiritual consciousness, they were not innate gods after all. Even if their spiritual consciousness was complete, their intelligence was limited, and they were mostly driven by instinct. Most of the reason why they attacked Hong Jun recklessly and tirelessly was because they instinctively repelled intruders. The appearance of the soaring serpent and the superior aura came directly from the instinct of life. It instantly intimidated all the nine-headed serpents that were attacking Hong Jun. The soaring serpents could not help but be stunned by such a huge shock. At this moment, Hong Jun's mind and the soaring serpent were one. Under the influence of the qi, the soaring serpent seemed to suddenly wake up from its sleep. It suddenly exploded and opened its mouth to a size that was countless times larger than normal. With a flash, it became as if it could cover the sky and earth. In the blink of an eye, it swallowed the hundreds of nine-headed snakes around it. With a burp, the soaring serpent suddenly expanded 10 times, from its original length of 30 feet to 30 feet. It had already integrated the water, thunder, and cold wind that made up hundreds of nine-headed serpents into its body, strengthening its body. Hong Jun raised his hand and waved gently. The soaring serpent flew into the air like an emperor inspecting his country. It exuded an insufferably majestic aura and was brimming with a superior aura that looked down on everything. This tongue snake was like an external incarnation, but Hong Jun could control it as he wished. Moreover, because it contained some very mysterious thoughts, it caused Hong Jun, who cut his thoughts into it, to only have the thoughts to attack, defend, devour, and other kinds of supernatural powers and spells, in addition to his own thoughts. This was an extremely strong and pure battle state. Hong Jun, who could not reach this level before, had actually achieved it in advance through the true martial spirit transforming technique. Feeling the feeling from the soaring serpent, Hong Jun suddenly understood something. Compared to this feeling, his state of mind instantly improved a little. The cultivation technique that Master taught me is indeed not random. It must be the most suitable cultivation technique for me. Hong Jun once again expressed his admiration for Luo Fan in his heart. Then, with a thought, the soaring serpent spun and wrapped around his body in an instant. With a sudden rush, it carried his body towards the nine-headed serpent that was pouncing towards him from a short distance away. The soaring serpent was condensed by the true martial spirit transforming technique with the help of the water Een thunder and cold Een wind. It was an existence that Luo Fan had condensed after a deep understanding of these two energies. Its starting point was much higher than the nine-headed serpent that had not grown to the peak. Perhaps the nine-headed serpent at the peak could compare to it, but there was no such existence in the ninth level of the soaring serpent. When the energy of the same quality was condensed, the higher quality would naturally completely suppress the lower quality. For the nine-headed serpent, the soaring serpent was like a natural enemy. In the territory of the nine-headed serpent, the soaring serpent was unstoppable. In just a few days, it had swallowed tens of thousands of nine-headed serpents and grown to the minimum requirement recorded in the true martial spirit transforming technique by Luo Fan, a length of 10,000 feet and a diameter of 10,000 feet. When the soaring serpent reached a length of 10,000 feet, a very mysterious change occurred in an instant. Hong Jun suddenly felt that the soaring serpent seemed to have a real life, and it seemed to have become more agile. When his mind cut into it, he could even feel another soul talking to him. An obscure and mysterious vitality rushed out of the soaring serpent and spread over a radius of tens of thousands of miles, as if an emperor of this world had been born. The wind blew and the clouds moved, and a huge whirlpool was born. The scene was quite grand. With this change, Hong Jun suddenly felt as if he was being stared at by something. Before Hong Jun had time to carefully sense the specific changes after the soaring serpent had grown to the minimum requirement of the true martial spirit transforming technique, he found a large wave of pitch-black light rushing towards him from the southeast. After the soaring serpent had completely changed, the large wave of pitch-black light came in front of him at the same time. There were hundreds of nine-headed serpents. They were of different sizes, and their strengths were uncertain. However, even the largest and the weakest among them was 30,000 feet long. The strongest was the leader of the nine-headed serpent, which was 100 feet long. "Outsider, this is my territory. Hiss! Get out of here! Hiss!" Then a powerful and vast wave of power came out of his body and stirred the surrounding primordial chi. The nine-headed serpent had actually developed intelligence, and its nature was close to that of an innate god. It could actually communicate with an innate god. Although Hong Jun was surprised, he did not think it strange. In this untainted land, there were all kinds of strange existences. However, there was nothing strange about a monster that could communicate with him. The strong are respected. Let's fight and decide. Hong Jun's goal was to use the battle to temper his mind and strength. Naturally, he would not retreat because of the powerful and vast power of the nine-headed serpent. "Outsider, hiss!" The leader of the nine-headed serpent was furious. After his 9 heads roared into the sky, 9 rays of light that were gray, black, brown, and other dark colors rushed out of his 9 mouths. As the 9 rays of light rushed out, an extremely powerful aura covered the sky and the earth and shrouded Hong Jun's heart trembled. He already understood that under the instinctive pressure of the soaring serpent, the leader of the 9-headed serpent had already launched his strongest attack. The 9 rays of light converged in midair and scattered. One of the rays of light turned into a huge net that covered the sky, flashing with black lightning. Another ray of light turned into a strangely shaped heavy object that seemed to be so heavy that even space could not bear its weight. Another ray of light turned into a strangely shaped sharp blade that seemed to be able to cut primordial chi. Although there were 9 rays of light, they seemed to cover the sky and the earth, spewing out all kinds of things. The scene they created was extremely grand. When Hong Jun saw the things that covered the sky and the earth, he suddenly had a feeling that he could not fight against them. Fortunately, he was constantly using the true martial soul transformation skill. When he felt that he could not fight against them, a cool was transmitted from the soaring serpent to his mind and will. Hong Jun's mind was clear, and the feeling of being unable to fight against them was instantly expelled. At the same time, before Hong Jun could control the soaring serpent, it raised its head and let out a long roar that sounded like a flying dragon and a snake. Hong Jun's mind moved, and he felt ashamed. He controlled the soaring serpent to shake instantly, and the clouds on its body surged. Its body circled and rushed towards the attack that covered the sky and the earth. The entire process seemed to have been rehearsed thousands of times. Every move was filled with indescribable principles. After just 9 washes, the soaring serpent used the tiniest amount of power to destroy all kinds of things that the 9 rays of light had evolved into an endless variety of energy. Then, the soaring serpent paused for a moment. Under the 9-headed serpent's incredulous gaze, it suddenly opened its mouth and swallowed him. After swallowing the leader of the 9-headed serpent, the soaring serpent let out a burp, and a wave of joy passed into Hong Jun's heart. Then, the soaring serpent's body shook, and it suddenly doubled in size, growing from the original 10,000 feet to 20,000 feet. It actually only grew to this size. It seems that the further I go, the more difficult it will be to improve the true martial soul transformation skill. Hong Jun thought about it, and his understanding of the true martial soul transformation skill increased by another level. The strength of a 9-headed serpent was hundreds of times stronger than Hong Jun's own strength, and it was many times stronger than the soaring serpent's own strength. However, after absorbing so much energy, the soaring serpent actually only doubled in size. Compared to the previous 10,000 feet, the difference was more than 1,000 times. The meaning contained in this was really thought-provoking. Luo Fan, who was at the top of Buzhou Mountain, felt the changes in Hong Jun and was very satisfied. He knew that with the true martial soul transformation skill, Hong Jun's mind could not only be tempered, but his safety would also be greatly increased. He was more or less relieved. Suddenly, he thought of something and used the yin-yang test method to calculate with his fingers. His eyes could not help but show surprise and satisfaction. Chapter 87. The reason why Luo Fan had worked so hard just now was that the thought he had left in a certain innate God spiritual sense had been touched. At this time, Luo Fan had achieved the realm of true immortality, and his cultivation realm had reached an unimaginable level. Through the yin-yang test method, the result was extremely clear. All the causes and consequences were as clear as the palm print. 1 yuan hui ago, not long after Luo Fan had met Hong Jun, he met an innate god whose original body was a strange tree. This innate god did not have a complete spiritual sense, nor did he have any cultivation method. However, it had very mysterious fruits and leaves, and Luo Fan had benefited a lot from it. In order to express his gratitude, he left a basic cultivation method and promised that if the strange tree wanted to, it could come to him and he would accept it as a disciple. At this time, after 1 yuan hui, the strange tree finally completed the goal that Luo Fan had set before. With the help of the basic cultivation method, after a long period of cultivation, it finally got rid of its original body and transformed. Through the mysterious connection with the thought left in the body of the strange tree, Luo Fan directly saw the scene where the strange tree was in his mind. It turns out to be a woman, not a man. After Luo Fan saw it clearly, he was both surprised and felt that it was reasonable. The place where the strange tree was, which was originally full of vitality, was now in a mess. Charred wood was everywhere, and smoke and fire were burning. It seemed that it had been bombarded by the thunder above the ninth heaven countless times. At this time, it had become a ruin. In the middle of the ruins, there was a woman standing in the air. 3 feet above the ground, a woman stood in the air. She wore a green dress and was very beautiful. When she opened and closed her eyes, there was an incomparably pure and clear light, as if she had the heart of a child. She looked very innocent and cute. Through his earlier calculations, Luo Fan had already clearly calculated the cause and effect of the situation. He naturally knew that the strange tree had accumulated sufficient strength, causing the lightning and fire within the astral wind, lightning and fire layer to bombard it. In the end, it had relied on the energy of the lightning and fire to escape from its body and take form. The woman stood in the air, and strands of transparent and mysterious yuan qi constantly seeped out of her body. There was also an immeasurable life force surging in her body, reflecting her clear eyes. She was like a fairy that had fallen to the mortal world from the 9 heavens. This person was able to leave such a will in my heart a long time ago, so he must be a powerful being that is hard to find in this world. Him being willing to be my master is truly a great fortune for me. The woman was extremely happy as she muttered to herself. Her voice was clear and melodious, like heavenly music. When she finished speaking, she raised her hand and gently waved. A 3-dimensional talisman shaped like a Buzhou mountain instantly rushed out of her palm, suspended in front of her head, and slightly pulsed, as if it was a heartbeat. This Buzhou mountain was 3 feet high, and the lines that formed the 3-dimensional talisman were condensed from incomparably condensed energy. The quality of this energy was many times higher than the energy in the woman's body at this time. The entire 3-dimensional talisman emitted an extremely mysterious aura, like an extremely mysterious magic tool. It seemed to contain an infinite void, containing everything, but it also seemed incomparably simple, like it was already some kind of the smallest unit. It was too wonderful for words. Looking at the 3-dimensional talisman, the woman's face was filled with shock, yearning, and fascination. This power is really great. When can I also have this kind of power? How great would that be? The woman was obviously pure and even more ignorant of the affairs of the world. What she thought in her heart was what she said. She took a step forward, and her body seemed to move with the wind. She floated up and landed on the ground. Closing her eyes to sense, the woman's face showed a determined expression. She stretched out her hand, and the 3-dimensional talisman that was 3 feet high and shaped like the Buzhou mountain fell into the woman's hand. After falling into her hand, the 3-dimensional talisman suddenly emitted a rich grayish-brown light and gradually shrank. Finally, it sank into her palm and turned into an extremely complicated and mysterious tattoo. That direction? I must find this powerful person. The woman clenched her fist and held the small tattoo in the palm of her hand and said resolutely. Luo Fan, who was far away on the Buzhou mountain, saw this scene, and his eyes revealed a thoughtful expression. After a long time, he shouted, "Where is the limitless boy? The limitless boy is here, listening to Master's orders." An emotionless voice suddenly sounded in front of Luo Fan. After the voice, a cute boy with pink and jade-like makeup appeared in front of Luo Fan. However, there was no expression on his face, which destroyed his golden, childlike temperament. Go to these 12 places and set up these obstacles. There are 12 incantations here. You can leave them there, Luo Fan said lightly. Then, a spiritual light rushed out of his hand and went straight into the limitless boy's eyebrows. Countless complicated words and patterns flashed through the limitless boy's eyes. After a long time, these words and patterns faded away. After fading away, the limitless boy bowed, and his figure flickered. He had already disappeared in front of Luo Fan. At the same time, the limitless palace, which was originally absorbing endless chaotic chi on the top of the Buzhou mountain, turned into a purple-yellow light and suddenly rushed toward the direction of the woman. In the blink of an eye, it disappeared without a trace. Since you have the heart to worship me as your master, then let me see your persistence and awareness. Luo Fan sent his divine sense into the woman's body. Looking at the woman who didn't notice anything, he thought to himself. During this period of time, the everlasting Void Palace had been at the top of Buzhou Mountain, enduring the terrifying pressure between heaven and earth, absorbing the endless chaotic energy from the top of the mountain to replenish the chaotic energy in the minor kiliocosm of the everlasting Void Palace. In the past 129,600 years, the amount of chaos yuan qi he had absorbed was probably hundreds or even thousands of times more than the amount of chaos yuan qi Luo Fan had absorbed. With such a large amount of chaos yuan qi, the small world inside the Wuji Palace had been endlessly refined. The size of the continent inside the palace had increased by more than 10 times. The yuan qi that was originally in between Xiantian yuan qi and chaotic yuan qi had completely turned into chaotic yuan qi in the core of the lightning pool. On the Yang platform, the amount of chaotic yuan qi had reached a level where even if the flow of time was accelerated by 365 times, it would still be enough for Luo Fan's cultivation. Although the density of the chaos yuan qi at that time was far less than the density of the chaos yuan qi at the top of Buzhou Mountain, it wasn't any worse than an ordinary source of chaos yuan qi. As his body grew, the Wuji boy, who was a treasure spirit, naturally also made great progress. He had become more intelligent, more autonomous, and his use of power had also become more superb. In the past, it was impossible for him to appear and disappear without any trace of smoke or fire, just like he did now. Through the experience of accepting Hongjun as his disciple, Luo Fan had gradually formed his own style of accepting disciples. It wasn't like before, where he would directly give his disciple whatever benefits he felt was good to him. Instead, he would put the benefits there. Depending on how hard the disciple worked and how far he could go, he would give him the same amount of benefits. He had ordered the Wuji boy to set up the 12 tests on the way to Buzhou Mountain. It was to test this woman's heart, to seek Tao, to test her temperament. If she passed the 12 tests perfectly, then Luo Fan would naturally treat her as a personal disciple comparable to Hongjun. He would give her the 12 techniques that were placed on the test ground. Then, he would give her careful guidance, and she would not be inferior to Hongjun. And if she couldn't even pass one test, then Luo Fan would at most treat her as a registered disciple. After teaching her a few techniques, she would be left to fend for herself. I can prepare everything for you, but you have to fight for it yourself. I won't give it to you so that you can get it easily. Chapter 88. This disciple has appeared. I wonder what has happened to the fruit that was suppressed in the pool of thunder. When Luo Fan saw the strange tree transform into a woman, he finally thought of the fruit that was suppressed in the depths of the pool of thunder because he was unwilling to be a father. He wondered if the fruit had become a treasure spirit. I still need a magic weapon to use it. Thinking of this, Luo Fan remembered that Limitless Boy had already brought the Limitless Palace to the path where the woman came to Mount Buzhou to set up a test. He couldn't help but sigh at the lack of magic treasures. In fact, when he was tormented by Luo Fu, he had walked all over Buzhou Mountain. He had also collected a lot of refining materials. Among them, there were 81 kinds of spiritual fruits, 12 kinds of spiritual roots of heaven and earth, 81 kinds of refining materials that had begun to have spiritual vigor, and there were all kinds of materials that were at the level of 5 elements essence. Among the 81 kinds of materials that had begun to have spiritual vigor, there were 18 of them that had the same function as the Primordial Chaos Stone, which could promote a celestial device to a magic weapon. They were enough to promote 18 celestial devices to the level of a magic weapon. These 18 things that had the same function as the Primordial Chaos Stone were none other than the embryonic innate gods on Buzhou Mountain who had failed to transform their spiritual consciousness. Ever since Mount Buzhou was 90,000 miles tall, there were numerous hidden life forces scattered all over the mountain. These life forces could be found in almost every other location. Those were the embryonic forms of the innate gods. Even if they were embryonic forms, they could still grow successfully and fail to grow. Obviously, not all embryonic forms could grow into innate gods. As a matter of fact, almost 90% of the hidden life forms on this section of Mount Buzhou above 90,000 miles would not be able to turn into innate gods. These vitality would eventually transform into refining materials similar to the primordial chaos stone. As time passed, the vitality would dissipate and eventually become ordinary materials. Even the energy of the primordial chaos stone would disappear. Although Luo Fan was not unrealistically benevolent, the primordial world was too barren. If there was one less innate god, there would be one less vitality. That was why he did not collect the obscure vitality that had the slightest chance of growing as a refining material. Therefore, during that period of time, there were so many hidden life forces, but he had only collected 18 of them. With a thought, he flipped his hand, and a fist-sized silver liquid object that flickered with a metallic sheen appeared in his hand. It was one of the 18 mysterious objects. The vitality of the primordial world is becoming more and more exuberant. There will definitely be a lot of battles in the future. This time, I need to refine an offensive treasure. Luo Fan thought to himself. In the blink of an eye, he had already decided what kind of Dharma treasure to forge. As he made up his mind, Luo Fan opened his sleeve, and the space in his sleeve, which had increased by 100 times, opened up. Thousands of refining materials the size of a small mountain rushed out and floated in front of Luo Fan. The space of this cave abode was limited, but it could accommodate such a small mountain of materials. It did not make people feel the slightest bit out of place. The principle behind it was extremely mysterious and wonderful. It fully displayed the ability of an immortal cave abode. Chaotic essence iron, Ewood true source, water essence, 100,000-year-old agarwood essence, Bing ding true, fire. Luo Fan muttered in his heart. Thoughts flashed through his mind, and he analyzed and distinguished the materials that were the size of a small mountain. In a short while, he had already figured out how to refine each material and what use it would have. With a thought, he raised his hand and pointed at the material that was the size of a small mountain. A gray flame directly shot out from his finger. It grew with the wind, and in the blink of an eye, it seemed to cover the sky and the earth, filling up most of the space of the cave abode. Even so, it did not release any heat, nor did it damage any of the surrounding materials. It was obvious that Luo Fan's control over the flames had reached the point of perfection, reaching the acme of perfection. This flame was not something else, but the most suitable for refining weapons. It was a Tao flame that was ignited by a fruit of the way and used chaotic essence qi as the fuel. After the flame appeared, it wrapped around the small mountain of refining materials in front of Luo Fan and instantly entered it. It also produced a strong suction force, constantly tearing the endless chaotic essence qi in the surroundings and rushing into the Tao flame, making it even more vigorous. Wisps of black mist rose from the materials that were wrapped by the Tao flame. The material that was the size of a small mountain melted and shrank at a speed visible to the naked eye. There were tens of thousands of different types of materials in this material. The various materials' ability to withstand the flame was different, and even the difference was like heaven and earth. But the Tao flame could automatically adjust the intensity of the flame so that the Tao flame could work on these materials, but it did not exceed the limit of their endurance. It was really mysterious. Although the Tao flame's ability to purify and refine was strong, there were a lot of materials, and it would take a certain amount of time for it to be completely effective. After 3 days and 3 nights, the volume of the material stopped shrinking. It was only now that it was purified and refined to the purest stage. At this time, the material that was the size of a small mountain had already turned into a strange liquid ball with a diameter of 10 feet. It floated in front of Luo Fan, emitting a kind of enchanting brilliance. Luo Fan's mind slightly moved, and a mental cultivation method mnemonic chant flowed through his mind. At the same time, the earthly immortal Tao fruit within his dantian shook abruptly before collapsing with a bang, and it transformed into a strand of magic energy that charged out from the 129,600 meridians within the walls of his dantian. It revolved around a profound path and circulated 81 times within his body before transforming into a profound light that charged out from the center of his palm. It went straight into the liquid ball and flowed wildly. In the end, it turned into strands of energy lines and formed three-dimensional talismans one after another. It scattered and combined into layers of restrictions, and under the effect of the Tao flame, it constantly fused with these materials. With the formation and fusion of the restrictions, the Tao flame that had originally lost its effect on these materials began to work again. The material that seemed to have been compressed to the limit was compressed again, and it constantly twisted and deformed, gradually changing into the shape of the magic tool itself. A mysterious, earthy yellow light suddenly burst out from the material. After the light faded, the material had already condensed into a palm-sized seal. It was the first layer of restrictions that had finally fused with the material, and a magic tool had begun to take shape. After this light flashed, more light flashed, one after another. It flashed for a total of 35 times before it completely disappeared. In the blink of an eye, there were 36 layers of restrictions. With Luo Fan's current cultivation and realm, refining magic tools was no longer a challenge for him. As the 36 layers of inhibition formations merged with this magic treasure, three complicated and mysterious characters created by Pangu appeared under the seal, Ultimate Square Seal. The entire seal became even more mysterious, as if it contained some kind of mysterious principle. At this time, the Tao flame was still burning the seal, but it was waiting for the material to fuse, waiting for another step of improvement. Luo Fan raised his hand and waved gently. The silver liquid ball that had been waiting outside for a long time, exuding a hidden vitality, directly rushed into the seal. It was burned by the Tao flame and gradually fused with the seal. At this time, in a place 93,000 miles above the ground of Buzhou Mountain, an extremely mysterious change was happening in a cave filled with the coldest air, a change that was completely beyond Luo Fan's expectations. Chapter 89. Luo Fan was no stranger to this crypt. He had been dragged down here by Luo Fu before. At that time, he had also discovered the existence of a prototype of an innate god in this crypt. And according to Luo Fan's estimation, the possibility of this prototype growing into a real innate god was very small. If it were not for that slight chance, he would have already taken it as a refining material. But at this moment, this crypt was filled with a mysterious qi. The entire crypt, which was originally extremely and extremely cold, showed an indescribable vitality because of this qi. Suddenly, in the middle of the and extremely cold qi in the crypt, there was an additional existence of extreme yang and extreme yang. Things would move in the opposite direction when they reached an extreme. Faintly, there was an inexplicable qi that shrouded this existence of extreme yang and extreme yang. This aura seemed to have directly seeped out from the void, containing some kind of mysterious and unfathomable information. It nourished and nourished this extremely masculine existence, as if it was tending to a tinder, allowing it to develop and strengthen. Dong, dong, dong. A sound that was like a heartbeat gradually came from that existence of extreme yang and extreme yang. The sound became louder and more obvious. Finally, it was like a drum, rumbling and shaking the crypt slightly. With this mysterious change, the qi that was mixed in the and extremely cold qi became more and more obvious and powerful. At a certain moment, this qi rose to a limit, and suddenly, it was restrained and disappeared completely. It could no longer be sensed. At the same time, the existence of extreme yang and extreme yang also underwent a mysterious change in an instant. The qi that came from the void contained this unpredictable information and enveloped this existence of extreme yang and extreme yang. In an instant, it completely disappeared. With the disappearance of this qi, the existence of extreme yang and extreme yang suddenly produced an extremely powerful suction force, tearing the endless een and cold chi in this crypt. As a result, a huge whirlpool gradually appeared in this crypt. At this moment, the een and cold chi was rapidly being absorbed, but it was thinning at a visible rate. And after absorbing the endless een and cold chi, that extremely masculine existence became even hotter and more masculine. By the time all the een chi in the cave had been absorbed, that spot of extreme yang had already turned into a huge golden ball of light. It was like the sun, pulsating and releasing endless light and heat. After being illuminated by the light and heat, the originally cold cave became like a place of extreme yang, without a trace of coldness. After a long while, the heartbeat accelerated to the extreme, and the extreme yang light receded, revealing a handsome young man who was 6 feet tall, with a pair of long spiral horns on his head and a pair of bat wings on his back. It was a strange-looking innate god. His appearance was a combination of ferocity and gentleness, ugliness and handsomeness. Although it was not the innate Taoism body in the image of Pangu, it was still mysterious. As soon as this young man appeared, he sank down and landed on the ground at the bottom of the crypt. His knees went weak, and he knelt on the ground, looking up at the sky and kowtowing. After kowtowing, the young man looked up the sky and prayed, "Thank you for your great efforts, Mother. Mo Luo will not disappoint you, and fulfill your wish soon." After praying, he kowtowed 3 more times, then stood up and muttered a mysterious incantation. His body scattered and turned into a een wind. He sank down again and went straight into the ground of the crypt. This innate god called himself Mo Luo, and it was obvious that he had a complete spiritual consciousness since birth. He also knew his own name and could use all kinds of magic at will, which was quite strange. The body of an innate god who grew up by absorbing the extreme cold een chi was the extreme yang and the extreme yang, but the power he used was the extreme een and the extreme cold. The mystery behind it was beyond words, and it contained endless principles. The speed of een wind that Mo Luo transformed into was as fast as lightning. In just a short while, it had already crossed the 93,000 miles thick body of Buzhou Mountain and reached the ground. The unusually sturdy and fine mountain of Buzhou Mountain seemed as if it did not exist, and it could not obstruct the een wind at all, making people think that it was flying in the void. The een wind traveled another 2,900 miles before it condensed again and turned into the figure of Mo Luo. At a depth of 2,900 miles from the ground, there was a yellow river that was formed by the condensation of heavy and turbid een chi, and it was unknown how long it was. The Yellow Spring. After falling into the Yellow Spring, Mo Luo took a deep breath of the heavy and turbid een chi, and he looked extremely intoxicated. Then he laughed loudly. "This is the place that Mother was talking about. If I cultivate here, I will definitely be able to become an Earth Devil Tao fruit soon, and then I can help Mother's real body to come to this world." Mo Luo laughed wildly. The Yellow Spring below Buzhou Mountain was different from the Yellow Spring in other places. The Yellow Spring here only had one direction. The reason was that the place directly below Buzhou Mountain was the origin of the Yellow Spring. In the underground, in the northwest direction of Buzhou Mountain, there were countless small tributaries that came from nowhere, and they continuously converged until the position directly below Buzhou Mountain was directly below Buzhou Mountain, and they converged into a river that was 1,000 miles wide, forming the huge and mysterious Yellow Spring. Ha! Ha! There's a newcomer of the same kind. Boy, consider yourself lucky that you have met me. I still abide by the rules. As long as you hand over half of the origin, I will guarantee your safety in the Holy Land. At this time, a gloomy voice sounded 1,000 feet away from Mo Luo's side. Mo Luo frowned and turned his head over, and he saw an enormous living being that was 300 feet long and shaped like 3 black leopards floating there, and those 6 eyes were looking at him with a greedy gaze. Mo Luo's eyes each emitted a black light that enveloped the 3 black leopards. Suddenly, he roared with laughter. "What a good living being! It is actually condensed from heavy and turbid extreme in-chi, and it is devouring and cultivating with me. As soon as he finished speaking, he didn't wait for the tangible talisman ghost to react, and his body dispersed to transform into a ball of white light that emitted the aura of extreme yang, and he suddenly pounced and enveloped the 3 black leopards within the white light. How could the 3 black leopards have expected that the food below their mouths would suddenly become a ghost that would haunt them? They couldn't react in time, and they were enveloped within the white light. They only had time to emit extremely shrill cries, and along with these shrill cries, horrifying chewing sounds could be heard. No matter what kind of existence it was, its place of origin would be comparatively simple, but it was the most profound, and it contained the most profundities. This yellow spring was the same. The yellow spring at this location wasn't like the other yellow springs, which were filled with endless, formless talisman ghosts. Instead, it seemed rather empty, and there was only an extremely small amount of life within a few 100,000 miles. However, this didn't reduce the profoundness of the yellow spring's origin in the slightest. This was because the extremely small amount of life here was emitted by the tangible talisman ghosts, which were a level higher than the formless talisman ghosts. In this place of the yellow spring's origin, what was active were the formless talisman ghosts, which were rarely seen in other locations. Just after Mo Luo fell into the yellow spring for half a day, he saw 13 formless talisman ghosts wandering around this location. Delicious, good living beings. Mo Luo wiped his mouth and exclaimed in admiration. Although Mo Luo was a newborn innate god, he wasn't like other innate gods who were born as blank as a piece of paper. Instead, he seemed to have received the teachings of his mother and possessed many magical powers. He even had the ability to devour heavy and turbid extreme in-chi to grow. As for the formless talisman ghosts, they were condensed from a heavy yang talisman absorbing endless heavy and turbid extreme in-chi and could be said to be his most delicious food. Hence, the 13 formless talisman ghosts that he saw were devoured by him without any doubt. With the nourishment of these 13 formless talisman ghosts, Mo Luo's aura doubled. He was so ferocious that he had the bearing of a demon king. Chapter 90. Mo Luo was truly like a fish in water in the Yellow Springs. He could casually obtain any of the corporeal rune ghosts in the Yellow Springs to strengthen his own cultivation. His impressive demonic might had already made him the overlord of the Yellow Springs. The Yellow Springs directly below Buzhou Mountain was the source of the Yellow Springs. It contained endless mysteries. This place was the holy land for many corporeal and formless rune ghosts. Due to the strength of the corporeal rune ghosts, the formless rune ghosts here were completely wiped out by the corporeal rune ghosts, leaving only the corporeal rune ghosts here. In the Yellow Springs, a corporeal rune ghost could only be born in sections of the Yellow Springs that were hundreds of thousands of miles long. This place was the source of the Yellow Springs. Although there would be more, there wouldn't be too many. However, because the corporeal rune ghosts all treated this place as their holy land and gathered here endlessly from the lower reaches of the Yellow Springs, the number of corporeal rune ghosts that finally gathered at the source of the Yellow Springs would not be too small. Although it wasn't overwhelming, it wasn't rare. Mo Luo knew that the corporeal rune ghosts were beneficial to his cultivation, so he naturally wouldn't hold back. He spent 49 days to clean up all the corporeal rune ghosts in the so-called Holy Land of the corporeal rune ghosts directly below Buzhou Mountain. There were a total of 365 corporeal rune ghosts. After absorbing and devouring these 365 corporeal rune ghosts, the aura that Mo Luo emitted was extremely terrifying. Every time he raised an arm or a foot, there would be an overwhelming aura. The water of the Yellow Springs and the surroundings was constantly being absorbed and devoured by him, constantly being converted into energy within his body. Every place he passed by, a huge vortex would appear due to the terrifying suction from his body. This vortex was the most obvious characteristic. It made Mo Luo as conspicuous as a firefly in the darkness in the Yellow Springs. This also made it increasingly difficult for Mo Luo to absorb and devour the corporeal rune ghosts. The corporeal rune ghosts that rushed to the Holy Land from the lower reaches were extremely cautious. Every time they saw Mo Luo from afar, they would know that this place was truly dangerous. Although they were reluctant, they would turn around and leave. Although Mo Luo's strength was thousands of times stronger than these corporeal rune ghosts, he wasn't born and raised in the Yellow Springs. He was unable to detect the aura of the corporeal rune ghosts from afar. Therefore, after cleaning up the corporeal rune ghosts at the source, it was extremely difficult for him to devour them again. Even if he did, he would barely become a corporeal rune ghost. When the 10 talisman ghosts escaped from under his nose, Moro finally understood. This is because I don't have enough control over my power. If I could control all my power as I please, how could this happen? Mo Luo thought to himself as he stood in the Yellow Springs. Although he was born with all kinds of divine abilities, and his abilities were quite shocking, he was only 49 years old after all. Although he had mastered the divine abilities in his memory, he was unable to control them to perfection. That was why he was unable to restrain his aura. After understanding all of this, Moro stopped hunting talisman ghouls. With a turn of his body, he was already out of the Yellow Spring. He rushed up 100 miles and sat cross-legged in a spherical space that contained the coldest Een aura. He silently circulated his cultivation method and tempered the energy in his body. Along with Moro's departure, the Yellow Springs once again returned to its seemingly chaotic but actually orderly state. 49 Ri. From the time Luo Fan fused the silver liquid into the square seal until now, it had already been 49 Ri. Luo Fan had only spent 3 Ri to refine materials that were like a small hill into a square seal that contained 36 restrictions. But to fuse the remnant of an innate god that was full of vitality into this square seal, Luo Fan had spent an entire 49 days, and only now did it show a trace of completion. During these 49 Ri, Luo Fan constantly circulated his earthly immortal Tao fruit to summon endless Tao flames to burn the square seal and deepen the degree of fusion between the silver liquid and the square seal. Its function is similar to a chaotic origin stone, but it isn't a chaotic origin stone after all. It's only natural that it's different from a chaotic origin stone. Luo Fan didn't feel any anxiety in his heart, and he just pondered to himself. Summoning the Tao flames was an instinct of the earthly, immortal Tao fruit. Although it lasted for a full 49 Ri, it didn't put much pressure on Luo Fan. In addition, the surrounding was full of chaotic origin Qi, which made Luo Fan have a deeper understanding of controlling the Tao flames to refine weapons in the process, and his control of the Tao flames also became more superb. Above the square seal, the silver light had not faded since the silver liquid had fused into it 49 Ri ago. It flickered like a signal light, and also like the beating of a heart. In the dark, there seemed to be a thumping heartbeat echoing along with the flashing light. For 49 Ri, there were no more changes, and there was no sign of it stopping. At this time, the silver light suddenly underwent a huge change. The flashing interval became shorter and shorter, and the flashing became faster and faster, just like a heartbeat that became faster and faster. Suddenly, the flashing speed reached the extreme, and it almost connected into a silver light that enveloped the square seal. At that moment, a soft sound came from the square seal. Luo Fan immediately felt that the square seal, which he had complete control over, suddenly emitted an extremely heavy and stable aura. At the same time, there was a very wonderful vitality coming from it. In the blink of an eye, he understood that the square seal had become a magic treasure. With this understanding, the silver light that enveloped the square seal suddenly retracted and instantly disappeared without a trace. The simple, and endless mysteries of the square seal appeared. "If the boy doesn't come out, when will you?" Luo Fan shouted and raised his hand to point. The flames that wrapped around the square seal suddenly retracted and disappeared without a trace. With the disappearance of the Tao flames, the square seal turned and fell. It turned into a simple and steady-looking young man. After the young man landed, he bowed and said, "Jifeng boy greets master." This young man was the treasure spirit of the square seal. It was a wonderful spiritual consciousness that had wisdom, emotions, and feelings, but no self-awareness. "Get up." Luo Fan waved his hand. "Thank you, master." After bowing, Jifeng boy stood up straight. Compared to the limitless boy, Jifeng boy's performance was more intelligent. Although there were no emotions in the depths of his eyes, as if everything had nothing to do with him, at least on the surface, he looked like a real living being. Without self-awareness, even if he had emotions, why did he express them? Why did he move? Therefore, it was difficult to provoke emotions in a living being without self-awareness. So he behaved as if he had no emotions. Luo Fan was not surprised that Jifeng boy behaved differently for the limitless boy. After all, Jifeng boy was a material that was formed from a failed evolution of an innate god embryonic form. It had a longer evolution process than the primordial chaos stone, so it naturally had a higher level of spiritual opportunity than the primordial chaos stone. Luo Fan's mind moved, and Jifeng boy's figure scattered and condensed, turning back into a palm-sized Jifeng seal. With another turn, it suddenly expanded to a radius of 10 feet. The three complicated and mysterious words "square seal" under the seal exuded an extremely mysterious aura. With a shake of his body, Luo Fan turned into a long rainbow and rushed into the seal. After entering, what Luo Fan saw was a space that was neither too big nor too small. It had a radius of 10,000 feet and a height of 10,000 feet. It was filled with countless silver lights, like a silver ocean. Although the square seal was not a cave abode, it was a magic treasure after all. It was not difficult for it to create a small void.